Hello and welcome to An Evening with Nirvana. It's a podcast where I'll be talking to a series of guests from the Doom community and probably some people outside of it about things like level design, map creation, other facets of game development. My guest today is Insane Gazebo. You will most likely know him as the creator of Sunder, which inspired an entire genre of slaughter. Also had a huge impact on texture work, speedrunning, basically a whole subset of the Doom community. He also has projects in community projects like Mapwitch. He's also working on Elementalism, I believe, and other UDMF projects. He's become a bit more of a jack of all trades in terms of ports and such. How are you doing today, Gazebo?
I'm good.
I think I should come clean and just say that we recorded a little bit already, and it broke, and now we're recording this again. So
We are,
yeah,
yes. This is take two.
but we'll pretend that it all went smoothly.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you again. You were getting into it already, and there is a great story attached, which I'll have to ask you to repeat at least. A little bit, a
Yeah.
truncated version maybe. So how did you get into Doom originally?
So um there was so I got the shareware version, like a lot of people. That was easy and free to get back in the day, as an Australian, but getting a registered copy, as in the full version, that was difficult. So I played the shareware thing to death, and the only person I knew that had the full thing was um a s it was a friend of mine. Like, so my best friend, his other best friend, had a copy of it, and um, I asked him, "Oh, can I have a copy too?" And he said, "No, we're not really friends. We never hang out." And I'm like, "Oh, well, we can hang out." I was determined to get a copy of that game, you see.
It's such a
So
good story.
we it was such a weird thing, and yeah, we went and we had an afternoon hanging out together. It was a little bit awkward, to be honest.
Did your mum
Um,
orchestrate this? Like, did one of your
no,
parents like
no,
this was all you at school or
this
something?
was yeah. I can't remember how it all worked out, but I think it was mostly because my best friend, who lived just down the street from me, was like they'd been friends since forever,
Mm-hmm.
basically, and it might have been through him or something, maybe I can't remember. But we hung out. I got my copy of Doom on some floppy disks. And yeah, they were like, I'm assuming this was Doom One. They were like there's some old network drivers because his dad was like a network engineer at a computer company, and these were just like some old network drivers that he didn't need. He just had Doom written in texture on, on the
Hell
old
yeah.
floppy disks. Yeah, and I finally got to play registered Doom, and yeah, it was a real experience. And I think the part I actually remember the most, rather than the game almost, was like just there was just a few pictures of Doom in like one of those gaming magazines back then. I
Mhm.
cannot remember which one. I just remember being absolutely transfixed by those screenshots. It was just like, yeah, it's really surreal and
Yeah, this was Doom
yeah,
ones, right?
yeah, yeah. It was just, yeah, it was just, it had a profound impact on me, I guess. Like there was something about like the art style of the game, and it wasn't just that it looked good. Yeah, because of the limitations and the texture styles and all those sort of artistic decisions they made back then. It just, yeah, I was just wowed by it completely, and I had to have it.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Well, yeah, I think it was kind of similar for me, but with Doom Two, because
mm,
I was a bit younger, so I think when I was a kid,
sure.
Doom Two was coming out,
Ah,
and there was like we had a magazine of Doom Two, and that had
mm.
it had like the whole roster of enemies with like
Oh
information about
wow.
them, like pictures of them, and how it was like how to
Oh
deal with
right.
them.
Oh wow. No, I
Yeah,
definitely didn't get that. I remember being like shocked when the arachnotron walked out. I'm like, oh, yeah, the baby spider. Even what the hell? Like you just you couldn't believe
oh
it.
yeah.
And because I did actually become better friends with that young kid years later, and he was the only person back then who had more than one computer in his house. Um,
Is this why you became his friend? to get
Well,
access to the second PC.
I won't lie, there was an ulterior motive there because he had like 5 PCs in the house or something
Oh my
back
god.
when most people were lucky to have one. Um, and it was just largely from his father's job. His dad got a lot of like computer gear that they're throwing out all the time,
Hmm.
and understood how to network the machines together. So we went up there and played multiplayer Doom a bit, and um, yeah, it was you know it was great, because as a kid, like multiplayer games, particularly back then, were extremely sort of rare. Like
Yeah.
there was dial-up Doom, which I've definitely got some stories about that later on. But uh, yeah, like any multiplayer Doom was just like that was the one place we could go to really to play it, and like that's the only other than playing dial-up. That was only always 2 players, so
Hmm.
yeah.
So you've used this man for decades just for Doom,
Oh yeah,
basically.
just yeah, 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 yeah,
Impressive.
yeah.
Uh, this was the question I got up to right before the whole thing exploded earlier. Which iWord sort of resonated with you initially? Was it that first sort of shareware or the registered version of Doom One, or which one was?
Well, there was there was those sort of two Doom periods for me. It was like when I was a kid. Like
Yeah.
I remember playing a bunch of little iWads as a kid. Oh, sorry, not well. You said iWad, yeah. I thought you meant P-Wad for a second. iWad. Um, yeah. I mean, I only really played like Doom 1 and Doom 2 really
Uh huh.
back then. So um, I, I think Doom 2 more than Doom 1 to some degree. Like partly because there was a few more like really sort of abstract designs in 2.
Yeah.
Like 1 definitely felt more grounded um overall. And I'd say like I think episode 1 of Doom, I think still yeah, like visually that was the one that sort of stuck in my head a lot.
That's
With
interesting.
the exception of some like it was also I think that in episode 2, I think. Like, I mean, I remember the few maps of Doom 1 that really stuck out. There was a bunch in the first episode. There was like Halls of the Damned was the other one I remember like really clearly, and then a Pandemonium was the other one I remember
Yeah.
thinking was rad as hell back when I was
Yeah,
younger.
I definitely would have thought of you as at least for Doom One as opposed to Ultimate Doom. I would have thought of you as an Episode Three kind of guy,
To some degree, yeah. Like,
or maybe
um,
Episode Two with the I don't know. There's a bit. I think of the big red cross in E2M1,
yeah.
stuff
Well,
like that.
yeah. It's funny that the Red Cross thing was yeah, that actually was inspired by something else entirely. But yeah, and Doom 2, the chasm absolutely was like the map.
Oh, interesting.
Like,
Zal also loved the chasm.
yeah, no, there's just something like visually about these sort of great impossible sort of underground canyons with just slime everywhere, and there's that bizarre building that had nothing but slimefall
Oh yeah, yeah,
walls, like
that is
right at the
weird.
start. And I was like, what on earth? Like, yeah,
Is it a sandy map?
yes,
It
it is a
is,
sandy
isn't
map,
it? Yeah.
and I personally really liked it. Um, I
Mhm.
looking back, some of the progression is definitely really strange, and I can see why
Yeah.
people, particularly back then, would have got lost. I'm pretty sure I would have as a kid, but back then you're just so tolerant to that kind of thing when you're younger. Like,
Mhm.
you're just used to getting lost and dying over and over in so many games. It's just
Yeah, you don't really have an ego yet when it comes to gaming. Like you're
no,
not like I should be able to do this, therefore I'm mad that I can't do it. But as a
yeah,
kid, you're like, well, I don't expect myself to
yeah,
be able to do anything.
yeah. I suppose. I mean, I I don't think I really thought that hard at all. I just sort of just kept playing until I got through whatever it was, and
Sure.
um, because yeah, it was back then. It was Doom, and I think Descent was the other game as well on that
Oh
period.
yeah, I actually
I
talked to
loved.
Vile for
Ah,
the previous podcast to this one, and
oh, there you go.
he speedran Descent. He has a bunch of
Oh
runs on
wow.
his YouTube
Oh
channel,
cool.
so check
Oh
those out.
Well, there you go. Yeah, no, I absolutely like that was the other game that was really inspirational to me. It was Descent. Um, there was something about the music and the atmosphere of the game, and I remember getting up to like the very first boss in Descent One, and just I was just terrified of it, and I eventually killed it, and finally got out of the level, and I was like, my heart was racing. I was like, I've done it, I've finally done it, and then it just crashed,
Uh,
and I was like, oh no,
that's
and
the
then
true DOS gaming experience.
it was so I did it again, but it crashed again. I was like, oh.
Uh,
And I might have done it a third time just to confirm my suspicions, but it crashed a third time when exiting the level.
oh no.
And I somehow figured out that it was actually running out of memory. There was just like the game technically would run with 4 MB of RAM back then, but
Whoa.
you needed 8. You needed a whole whopping 8 MB of RAM to get past that part. It was just like it was yeah, one of those
Just too
untested
much
sort of
going on
things.
for that four
Yeah,
megs.
it was weird. Like all the you'd exit all the other levels fine, but not map 7 or whatever it was.
Hmm.
And I somehow convinced my dad to get us a 4 extra MB of RAM, and it worked.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and Descent, like particularly when it came to like just navigating in games, because I don't know if you remember the map screen on Descent, but most people could not read that at all. It was just a mess.
Mm.
And yeah, I got pretty good at navigating in that game, and I think Descent 2 was one of the very early games I actually got in a box when I was younger. But yeah, I think that answers your question about the P-Wads, because I did not play any of the other P-Wads at all.
Yeah, had you played Final Doom before you made Sunless? Sorry, Sunless. Sunder.
Uh, I don't know. Probably. I
Hmm.
think so.
So, but
I
it doesn't sound like it was like there wasn't much of an influence in terms of
no,
gameplay
I
or.
by the time I ended up playing it, there was just so much more interesting stuff. I'm pretty sure.
Hmm.
Like I sort of played it as like a sort of completionist kind of thing
Yeah.
to see what it was all about. I remember enjoying it though. I remember quite enjoying episode 4
Hmm.
quite a
What?
lot.
So what about Oh, sorry. I was talking about Plutonia TNT Final Doom. Did you play those before?
No. Oh well, I mean later. It's the same thing basically.
Okay, sure.
I only played them like after the fact, like when they came out. No. Um,
Okay.
or if I did, I don't remember them at all, so they had no real impact on me. But
Uh-huh. So, you said you had these two periods of Doom. I'm assuming you played most of the P-Wads later.
yeah,
What what P-Wads were sort of your big early influences, do you think?
I mean, so I think I remember you talking about like your first attempts at mapping, and I think they were a bit like mine. Like you were too young
Hmm.
to really understand the tools very well, and also the early tools were absolute garbage.
Yeah.
Uh, there was like a lot of those WAD compilation discs back then, like D Zone and things like that.
Yeah,
And I
these are.
remember I remember going through a whole bunch of those, and I remember at least when I was a kid, there was two WADs that like stuck in my head, including one that would eventually influence me for Pale Monument a long time later. I don't remember the name of the WAD. I'll have to look it up. Um, but it was I remember finding it extremely hard back then. Um,
Mm.
whatever it was, I I don't know if I'll ever be able to find it again, unfortunately. But it was a '90s WAD, and it's probably just another forgettable '90s WAD amongst a great sea of them. But I distinctly remember it had a fairly big map, or at least as big to me back then, with those white pale texturized monument everywhere. I was
Right.
like, it was like the first time I'd sort of seen it used in that way, and I remember thinking how cool it looked. And then yeah, I tried picking up Doom. Oh god, what editor would it have been? Would have been I think I tried a few different ones. And I remember the first one I made any progress with was DCK, or Doom Construction Kit.
I think I've heard of
And
it. Never used it though.
yeah, and the very like there's a very old version of Macabre that was built in that. that is gone forever. Like I've lost it.
Right.
Um, that was yeah. But I think before that we were using a different one. Like that, my best friend who lived down the street. Yeah, we'd like initially have to go to his place to play Doom because we the monitor we had wasn't good enough. Like because back then, you were restricted by the monitor you owned in terms of like the amount of colors you could display. So
Hmm.
we only had an EGA monitor, which was like I don't know, was it 16, 24 colors or something instead of 256? Yeah, the VGA or the super VGA, which would come later. And so you had to go down there, and yeah, we'd make maps, and they were classic first maps. A room full of cyber demons and broken textures.
Yep.
You know,
I definitely made
classics.
those.
Oh yeah. I also got into back then Rise of the Triad briefly, like map editing, and I distinctly remember making like a bunch of Rise of the Triad maps and making a giant labyrinth map that lagged the absolute crap out of my own PC, but would at least run okay on my friends. Um, so I think, yeah, I think I finished my Rise of the Triad maps. Like those actually were playable. Um, oh my god, I remember there was an item in the game called Scott's Mystical Head. I assume Scott was like a developer or something in the game, and you'd
Oh.
you'd pick it up, and the game would just say Scott's Mystical Head when you picked it up. So we made this gigantic field of Scott Mystical Heads, like this huge room of them out in this like void, and then to like put traps all the way through it. So you just were blinded by all the Scott Mystical Head pickups, and you're like just not trying to get killed by the blade traps that were like moving about between them. Oh dear. And yeah, there was basically a few like early P-Wads back then, and then yeah, there's that second period in like 2004 maybe. Like I distinctly remember like the Doom 3 trailer came out,
Oh, yep.
and
It's a pretty
I
big
remember
deal.
going, it was. I was like, oh man, this looked crazy. Oh, look at that lighting tech, whoa, and all that,
Hmm.
and then yeah, that made me think back to classic Doom and make me think, oh, I wonder what's going on in classic Doom, and I've discovered there was this heaps of stuff for it,
Yep.
and I'm like, oh, there's these things called Doom ports, and I'm like, okay, what's the most advanced one? And I think I'm pretty confident like ZDoom came up as
Yeah,
like
around
the
that
top
time,
search
I think it
result.
would be.
Yeah, yeah. And I grabbed that because I'm like, well, I guess my thinking was, and it was for quite a while, was that well, everybody's just going to use the more advanced port, right?
I think
Why
that
would
was the
you?
thinking in general around Z Doom when it was coming out.
Yeah, yeah. So I grabbed that and I went through like a whole stack of different PWADs until I hit Alien Vendetta.
Yep.
Like that was the yeah, that was the great eye-opening experience because that basically like becomes quite slaughtery at a certain point,
Hmm.
and I was just blown away by the fact that not only could the game handle, you know, huge enemy counts, but it played well. Like that was the big thing
Yeah.
for me. And at that point, I needed to play every single map with the word slaughter attached to it, no matter the rating. So I dived in and played Hell Revealed 1 and 2, and the thing is, I actually enjoyed them like when I played them, because I didn't really have a lot to train them against in terms of what else I'd played.
Yep.
Um, like as far as I was concerned, there was a billion monsters charging me and killing me. I was having a good time. I think I played through Holy Hell as well, like
Very
the
wide.
original. Oh, crazy stuff. I had this weird feeling there was another one which was similar too, but
Was
I don't
it
remember what
Hell
that
Revealed?
was.
HR 1 and 2. Yes.
Oh, well, there was Hell Revealed 1 and 2, but there was another one that was like Holy Hell. There
Uh,
was another, like, yeah, I had screenshots somewhere of like some old map that I played. It
mhm.
maybe it was just Holy Hell and I just don't remember it very well, but I remember having to like, I think I had to like cheat through a couple of sections because I like just completely ran out of ammo and health, and there was still like 500 monsters in the room or something.
Yeah. Holy Hell would
Um,
have been real hard when it came out, for sure.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
definitely like,
absolutely.
it's pretty easy these days, but
Yeah, yeah, it's more grindy than anything.
I loved it when I
But
played it. I
oh,
love a bit of
same,
grind.
same. Yeah, yeah, like, that was a big thing for me was the grind, and I wanted to play all of those things. And then came Days Vault.
Ah, yeah.
Then I can't remember if Days Vault 2 was out at that point or if it was in production, but I remember playing Days Vault and just going, wow, this is incredible.
Hmm.
I was like staring at like the architecture on the map screen and stuff, and like thinking, well, how did he build that? Because like I could remember just enough from my early days of map making, like appreciate the architecture and things like that. And yeah, it at that point I'm like, I want more maps like this. Like that was the thing. Like I particularly after Desert 2
Yeah.
when that all came out, I was so hungry for something more like that. And there was
Yeah.
just at that point I'm like, oh, there's nothing. I was out. I was out of sort of slaughtery maps that had a high amount of effort put into them. There was quite a lot of low effort ones still floating around,
Yeah.
but yeah, I craved that sort of the mappers that were pushing like the engine in some way.
So this is where like Macabre comes in, I guess.
Yeah,
What
Macabre.
was uh what was
Yeah,
like
so
your goal
Macabre.
then with Macabre? Just to give yourself something to play, essentially?
Yeah, so Macabre. Like as I said, it started out as something I tried making when I was quite young in DCK, like back in the DOS days, and then like back when you had to use like the extended word editor and all that other sort of stuff. And then yeah, I came back to it basically. And the idea was to like just pretty the maps up and detail them because I at the time I thought, oh, these maps are fine and they play okay. So I basically sat down and I just started detailing them. That was the goal was just to detail and tweak those maps and release them and see what people thought.
Hmm.
Um, and I distinctly remember the first piece of criticism I ever got was like a screenshot of like the very first room I made, and I'd copied pasted this like little fleshy pillar thing in it, and the first like reply, one of the first like crits was something like, "Yeah, watch that copy paste," and I was like, I was mortified. I'm like, "Oh no, what else do I do? Like, how do I fix this? I don't. Oh no."
Little did they know,
Um,
copy
yeah,
paste is the backbone of do mapping. So
yeah, yeah. And I think that was just the goal was just to make like some atmospheric and maps that I thought were cool. I think that was about it, really. I don't think I really put a lot of like too much thought into it.
hmm.
Like, because I think a big thing about me was just, particularly when I was playing a lot of that slaughter, I wasn't, I don't, I wasn't really thinking about the gameplay like too critically.
Yeah.
Like I just enjoyed the high monster counts. I think. What really sort of got me interested was the visual side of things. Like, and particularly where those two intersected, like I love these great big hellish landscapes, just just completely overrun with the hordes of hell and all that.
Yep. I think like your maps in Sunder and sort of outside of it too. They're known for their like incredible scale. Where do you
Yeah,
think this came from? Was this from that D Zone map or or whatever all those years ago, or was
I
it from sort
don't.
of other games that you played, or was it to
Yeah,
facilitate the huge monster counts that you wanted?
I think I was thinking about this. I was thinking, okay, when did I actually start making those big maps? And um, I don't know. I mean, it depends what I guess counts as the first big one. I mean, the cage, I guess, to some degree. I think it was just because in my head, I don't know, I was just attracted to just these gigantic sort of like forms and shapes and landscapes and things.
Yeah.
It was just really appealing to me. And in fact, I now remember I tried to make my own version of the chasm when I was younger. except I was going to call it the pit. I was going to have this like, and I started making. I drew this gigantic pit using all the chasm textures, and the idea was you're going to slowly descend down into it. And I got as far as making the circle for the pit and drawing a couple of things, and tried launching it in Doom back before we had limit removing stuff, and it just crashed instantly because
Oh
it was
yeah,
just way too big, and I was like, ah, we'll fuck this then, and just gave up.
yeah. That's vanilla for
um,
you.
yeah, exactly. Like I remember back in the day, oh man, if you put in too many scrolling line defs, it would crash.
Yep.
And it would crash in, at least on the computer I had back then, it would crash in this really spectacular fashion. Like, it wouldn't just dump you back to DOS with like an error. You'd get the whole screen would start like melting to like the right, like bleeding across, like in this rapid succession. And then your PC speaker would just start beeping at you like mad.
Oh yeah, no, I remember that crash. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, like I kept getting that one. In fact,
Who?
I remember the first time we triggered it, was me and that best friend down the road. Um, we got up to Doom 2's final map, and we hid in the John Romero head area. And he's like, "Hey, let's leave the monster spawner going while we go down to the shop to get some lollies." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, great idea." So we go off to get our little sort of treats for the day and come back, and then we move out and we no clip back out the head, and yeah, we got that area just crashed the second we looked outside
Well,
at
the
the
other thing is
seal.
it had like a sprite and like
Yes,
sound limit too, so
yeah,
you would get
exactly,
this
yeah.
like sound screeching and popping when there were too many sounds happening, and then the monsters
Mm,
would start to pop in and out of existence, like they would go
yeah,
invisible, and
yeah,
then vanilla was
yeah.
a wild ride.
It was, and I distinctly remember not being able to use all the scrolling textures was another like nail in the coffin of early gazebo mapping. Like
Yeah.
not being able to do like as many of those as I wanted. I was so mad.
hmm
Um, and yeah, I kept getting those visplane overflows. Ah,
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot
man.
of similar problems with mapping for vanilla because I think a lot of my mapping was like I had a big concept and then I wanted to put it down kind of thing. So like I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
building with any restrictions in mind. Like I mean I learnt about viz planes through the tragedies of mapping in vanilla, but I didn't know about
Yeah.
them at the time. So yeah, I ran
Mm,
into a lot of like my maps were too
mm,
big to save, like the node builder
yeah.
would crash and
Yeah, yeah.
lots of
And that
problems.
and that was a big thing. Like that's part of the reason I got back into mapping later on after, all the new ports came out, was because those limitations were gone all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And like I realized, oh hey, I can now try to implement some of my old ideas. In fact, there's this early draft of like one of the card maps in the WAD file if you've gone through it, and it's like one of the last like maps in the WAD that's got at least some monsters in it. It's like this underground sort of map with like these orthogonal sort of shaped rooms one after the other, and like some like diamond lights on the ceiling. Does that ring a bell? I can't remember what map number it is, like maybe 6 or something.
I can't recall.
But yeah, the idea was that you were going to descend down through these rooms, and then it was going to be really cramped to start with, and then yeah, you're going to come out this like gigantic underground river. Like there's this like big reveal kind of thing, the kind of thing that would have definitely crashed doing back in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ran out of steam on Macabre at that point. I think that might have been when Sunder started, maybe.
hmm So why the jump from Macabre to Sunder? Like what were your goals for Sunder that were sort of different enough that it warranted beginning a whole
I
new project?
it it was just a difficulty, if I recall.
Right.
Um, well, there was two things. It was like I had just finally figured out after all these years, um, that like it's the texture division thing where like most of those Doom textures were made with very specific line lengths in mind and certain heights.
Yeah.
So that was a slight light bulb moment for me, when I finally sort of just actually bothered to take that in. Um, and yeah, I was like, oh wow, look at that. And I also wanted to start making some really punishing stuff as well.
Hmm.
I was just fascinated by some of the really hard maps at the time. And
Did you play any
I,
Death Destiny or anything like that? Was that around, or was this?
Ooh,
I'm trying to think when Death Destiny came in, related to you.
I don't know. That's Destiny. Yeah. I think he was later actually.
He might have been a yeah, maybe that was a bit
Actually,
later. Actually, my Doom
yeah,
timeline's a little bit.
I've Googled him and oh, actually no, around the same time according to the wiki, around 2008.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I did think
So
maybe that would have
yeah,
been
I
some
might have
stuff
played
later.
his stuff. It's very possible actually.
Mm.
I just don't remember it at all. Um, but I mean, I do remember No Chance
Yeah.
later on. Like, I definitely remember No Chance being an influence at some point. And I was hopeless at that map. I remember having no idea how to beat some of the fights back then, but still enjoying it. Um, so yeah, I think yeah, I basically thought okay, maps 1 and 2 are just too easy, and I can make better maps. I think was also the other thought. So I sort of shelved Macabre and made yeah Sunder maps 1 and 2 and 3. And 1 and 2 they're floating around. I think I've got copies of them, but they would eventually get scrapped for the current maps that are in the WAD, which are thematically like exactly the same. Like
Uh-huh.
it's it's yeah that green map and that lava rock map. Like it's the same sort of
Right.
concept. Um, Map 3 though was actually what would become Grinder. Um,
Map
because
6 is
that's what
Grinder.
map yes that would eventually be dumped into map 6.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, maps 1 and 2 were just very similar to Grinder in that regard. They were very, very compact, really hard sort of things with like, you didn't have much room to maneuver. Lots and lots of enemies from different sight lines and stuff. And
Hmm. Yeah, I was
um,
gonna ask actually, because like map one of Sunder is obviously like it's relatively tame compared to the rest of the world, obviously, because it's map
yeah,
one. Was
yeah,
it built like? Was it intended like just to be a starting map for the project, or was it
yeah.
built
It
like was that going to be the template in terms of gameplay for the rest of the WOD, and then
it
it changed?
I must have decided later on that the map 1 was just too hard, that I'd gone a bit overboard.
Uh huh.
But I still like the texture theme, so I decided to rebuild it from scratch and to ease the player in a bit more.
Yeah.
Like, because even back then I realized, oh, some players might bounce off this a bit. So that was my version of an easy map.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I just remember rebuilding that. And then I remember thinking, yeah, I'll need to redo map 2 as well. And I remember distinctly wanting to delete Grinder. And there was at least like multiple people who commented and said, please don't. I really like it.
Yeah, I like Grinder. I know
Yeah, oh, yeah.
it's a little bit controversial that map, but I do like it.
Oh. And
But we'll
I was
get
like,
to
oh,
that later.
all right, I'll keep it. And so I just figured, okay, Grinder's really hard. I'll just push it further back into the set.
Hmm.
Um, this is just something else I remembered as well. Like, because I was playing a lot of Slaughter around that time. Do you remember a cancelled French like Slaughter Megawatt in that period? That
No,
does that ring
I
a
mean
bell?
I definitely wasn't. I wasn't around and playing P-Wads like properly
Right.
until much later. Like
Yeah.
I had a Doomworld account in like
Mm,
2011, I want to say, and I was on the
yeah.
forums and looked occasionally, but I didn't
Okay.
heavily get into stuff until like much
Right.
later on.
Because there was I just had this flashback to it. There was a French community project for Slaughter stuff way back then. I remember seeing the screenshots and going, "Oh wow, that actually looks pretty good." Like those look pretty detailed and nice, and I'm pretty sure it never saw the light of day. Like I'm pretty sure the whole project fell apart for whatever reason. Um, yeah, I'll have to look up what that was later on.
So random French community project was a bit of inspiration, is what you're
It
saying.
was yeah, I vaguely recall something with a lot of like green in it.
Mhm.
That's all I can tell you.
There you go. If you're trying to find that map, just look for something a bit green. That should
Yeah,
be a good starting point for you.
yeah. Google will fill in the rest.
Yeah. Um. So I know there's like a vague. I think we talked about this just the other day, actually. But there's like a vague story underpinning Sunder, and a map 2, you start out in like this little graveyard. I was wondering if
Mm,
back when you started the WOD, did you have some kind of story playing in your head as you were mapping, or did that kind of come together later?
no, the whole point was just to like make sure that each map would have a different theme, feel to it. Just so as I remember, one thing I liked about some of those other community projects was like you didn't know what you were going to get in the next map, sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
whereas you have those other sort of more structured WODs like Scythe and Scythe 2 and stuff. Oh, I should have mentioned Scythe 2. That was the other like huge influence. Jeez.
Yeah.
Scythe 2 was like yeah, massive. Like I learned a lot of mapping tricks from that as well.
Uh-huh.
And I tried to actually replicate some of Eric Arm's mapping as well. I don't think I was particularly good at doing that, but I tried. um, but yeah, no, I just wanted to keep doing different themes each map. I just was having a lot of fun trying out new stuff, and that long term that's been like a really good decision because it's really motivating not having to map with the same like texture set each map or like for a series
Yeah,
of
I
maps.
agree. Yeah.
Um, and it's been a bit of fun like learning how to make textures and things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
You
I
know,
think a big thing, like with Fractured Worlds, it was the same for me. And even within one map, changing theme, like several times within one map, kept me like interested in what I was making. Because
yeah, yeah. And I
yeah,
remember like particularly when I was making map 11, I remember wanting to do one big final room, and I just remember thinking, I think people are going to be absolutely bored as hell of brown steel and lava at this point. I need to like spice it up.
yeah, because it's
And I
such a
thought,
stark change. It's
yeah.
yeah.
And I thought, oh, hey, there'll be this cool reveal. You come up to the final top and there'll be all this green. And I
Mhm.
thought, yeah, that palette change should be, yeah, I thought that people would enjoy that. And what's funny is that like, I remember hoping that someone would comment on that in like the thread, and I don't think anybody did.
Right.
I
Yeah.
was really disappointed.
Uh, well, you've sort of touched on this already. Now, that was sort of my next question that I was going to lead into, is because
Mm,
map 3 has this like focal texture of concrete. I think it's called concrete cement. Sorry, the cement is the texture, which is it's like pretty underutilized. So yeah, were
yeah.
you trying to play deliberately with texture theming? Like you say, you wanted to make unique themes, but were you also
Mm.
like, maybe I want to use this texture that isn't used that much, or like were you just
Oh,
playing with
what was
textures
the
and
thought?
things like
The
that?
thought. Well, yeah, there's definitely a bit of playing with textures for sure. I remember distinctly with the Dreaming Garden, I had the idea of like this sort of surreal garden map. That was the idea, was that I wanted to make a green map.
Hmm.
And my texture choices for something that fit were pretty limited because I was only just sticking to IWOD stuff. And yeah, I think I remember finding that texture and going, I could probably do something with this one. It's got a bit of green in it. And then just ran with it. I'm thinking, oh yeah, this will look pretty nice. We'll layer that up with the pipe texture. Um, which I've got to say is not something I would have thought to do these days because is it's a very vertical sort of texture, and these days I absolutely want the textures to follow the flow of the architecture itself. So if it's like a like heavily vertically repeating texture, I won't use that on like say like a thin sort of horizontal support or something like that.
Sure.
But back then, yeah, didn't really uh, didn't really care about that sort of thing at the time. I was sort of I think still sort of figuring that sort of stuff out, I guess. And I mean, yeah, that was basically it. And then I remember getting towards the final area and thinking I need to. I think I then thought I needed a change in theme, or I just spotted that wood texture and thought, oh, let's do like almost like I was thinking like sort of Japanese kind of buildings or something like that. I think
Hmm.
doesn't look anything like one really, but
Right. An
yeah, so
approximation.
yeah, like sort of some sort of surreal structure. Um, that approximates that, yeah. Um, and that was like the point where I was like, oh, I can sort of randomize all these cube sort of shapes. And this looks really cool. And yeah, that would become like an absolute staple for me later on, is just spamming cube shapes.
Hmm. And I always remember the bumpy floor cyberdemon fight. Uh,
Yes, you see, for me, it wasn't a bumpy floor because I was using
yeah,
Z2.
well, we'll talk about that a bit later on, but um, because it is very, I mean, it is very funny how many of these idiosyncrasies in Sunder fights sort of stemmed from you actually using a port that then most people wouldn't use to play Sunder.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't even find out about that for quite some time.
Yeah. Uh, for the moment though, with some of your more recent Sunder maps, they definitely have like more pronounced gimmicks for their encounters and stuff.
Mm.
But the original set is a lot more like it revolves around straight combat, I guess. But
Yeah,
map 4 uses like crushes as a main component
yeah,
of the encounters,
yeah.
and I was wondering what made you sort of want to make a map revolving around that concept.
Um, I'm trying to remember. Have this vague memory of an old P-Wad, probably from it was either back from like 2003, 2004 when I sort of just discovered like when I was using the Yid archives more or less for the first time. Um, and somebody had done there's that hexagonal sort of crusher bit in the map. Somebody had done something very similar to that in some like otherwise completely forgettable map. And I remember like that really stuck with me for some reason. And I really wanted to do like a multi-layered crushes like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, the next thought was hey, why not make an entire map just based around crushes? And I was like, oh, okay, well, to do that, I'm going to need like tech-based textures, but I hated Startan and a lot of the other things. They just they look very strange to me. They still look very odd to me as textures. Um, but then I found there was some other WOD that had a lot of like very dirty Startan in it that I'd found, and I remember like really liking the sort of like the dirty tech-based stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I tracked those textures down from who knows what it was back then. I wasn't like I was keeping track. So dumped them in and yeah, made them out. Yeah, just sort of just kept trying out different things with crushes and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uh, so map 5, precarious.
Mm.
Uh, may be the most notorious map in Sunder,
Yeah.
or at least definitely was for the original release. May have been
Mm.
usurped by some of the newer ones.
Maybe, yeah.
So like the type platforming and like the tricky pain elementals and stuff in that map have made it kind of maligned by a lot of people.
Yeah.
What was the process like for constructing like the platforming for that map, and what were you going for with the layout originally?
Right. So initially it was actually going to look quite a bit different. I had this like picture of my head of this great building or house or something, and the idea was like this: the floor just caved in and had just kept falling and falling until there was just lava like well below the player. And I'd sort of just pictured the player going across these like tiny little platforms, staring at the lava below. And I just sort of started building platforms. And I can't remember why I started building the tight little ones. I think it was just because I thought they looked interesting with the bricks and stuff like that. I guess I was thinking of sort of ruined buildings and those sorts of shapes. So, very irregular sorts of stacks of bricks sort of piled up that were,
Mm-hmm.
still, yeah. And so I sort of started drawing those, and just kept going. And I would have kept going. Like there would have been a lot more of that, but I ran into a problem that I run into later on in map 13 and 14 to some degree. Where if you draw like you've got like a really big sector with a huge amount of like lines in it.
It runs like trash
Well, it
in
does
the
run, but
editor.
the in the edit, well, when you want to make an edit, when you want to draw a new line in that sector, it it just gets slower and slower and
Yep.
slower. And I mean, I know the trick these days to stop that from happening. You just divide the sector up
Split it
into
up,
smaller
yeah.
blocks. That's all you do. But back then I was like, well, there's no way, there's no solution to this at all. I was obviously um, didn't even think for me to try anything really. But yeah, I just kept doing that. And yeah, as for the some of the more notorious bits in it, well, as I was saying earlier, like I just assumed that everybody used the advanced ports, and also assumed that everybody was using Freelock because that's how people played first-person shooters at the time. And I just assumed that everybody was doing that. Um, like I don't think I watched any of the demos back then. Like,
You
well, I
never
still
saw
don't
the
know.
glide.
No, no, I didn't know what a glide was back then.
Yeah.
I had no idea. If I'd seen that, absolutely would have blocked it. Um, and then also like was related to the pain elementals a bit too, was because I figured, well, if everybody's got free look, they'll just snipe the floating cacodemons and pain elementals and stuff with the chain gun.
Right.
Um, it won't be a big deal. Um, although I do recall deliberately putting in a couple of pain elementals that you'd have, like I wanted to force the player to race back across some of the platforms. I distinctly remember wanting that, and that's why there's like two that spawn in the
Yeah, the
middle.
two that always float away like a billion
Yeah,
miles away when you hit
yeah,
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like my intended strat for them was for the player to race back to them before things got out of hand. But unfortunately, a lot of players understandably don't notice that they're there. I mean, why would you actually see them? Because I think there's like a bunch of other things in the way. Um,
Yeah, I think they spawn in at the same time as some other stuff is going on like another platform.
yeah, I think at that point you're like just finishing up another fight, and you'll hit save at that point. They may have already drifted part of the way there. Um, I mean, yeah, if I ever like do any revisions to that map, I will probably just draw some monster blocking lines.
That
You
might
know,
help, yeah.
yeah.
Was
Um,
so is there any chasm in that map, do you think?
wasn't actually channeling Chasm when I made that. I just had the vision of that sort of broken floating building in my head, and then it just evolved from that little sort of image into
Mm-hmm.
what you see, and then eventually I sort of made it, and I sort of made two different little sort of tower designs which I copy pasted around, and I'm like, it's still missing something. I want something big in the distance. And I'm like, oh man, a castle would be really cool. And I'm like, oh, but if I do a castle, it's just gonna be sitting down the bottom. Like, you're not gonna be able to see it very well. Like, I think, because yeah, I think I started like drawing it and realized, oh, yeah, it's not gonna be a particularly visible castle. And I'm like, wait, unless it was on the ceiling. And so yeah, I just used the sectors I already drawn to like do this like floating upside down castle. I thought, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that looks pretty cool. I'll keep it.
Yeah, definitely a cool concept. Um so Grinder is the next map, and it's also
Yeah,
pretty notorious for a couple of
yeah,
reasons. One of them,
yeah,
the opening is brutal if anyone's played it.
yeah. Yes, yes.
Specifically that vile Revenant teleporter that happens.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then the other one is that the ammo count. Aside from maybe map 13, there really are many maps that you like run into ammo
No,
issues
yeah.
in
I was
Sunder.
usually very generous.
Yeah, but in Grinder it actually can turn into a big problem around the middle of the map. So I was
Yeah,
wondering
yeah.
what was your testing process like at this point? Was it
Uh,
just you testing your stuff, or did you have other people who were playing them for you before you
I
put them out?
I think I had other people testing. Grinder was probably one of the ones that didn't get a lot of testing because it was just part of the original three maps that I'd had.
Yeah.
And I because I think after that I started actually sending PMs to people. So I know like 1, 2, and 3, like of the newer ones, they definitely all got tested. I don't know if Grinder did or not, or if it was just me, but I do remember thinking like there was this because I remember thinking, particularly when I was making Dreaming Garden, that I got some feedback by at least a couple of people saying, "Yeah, I ran out of ammo here and here," and I remember thinking, "How?"
Hmm.
Like I hadn't quite figured out that when you're the maker of the map,
Yeah, you never run
you
out of ammo.
know, you just like you're gonna use your ammo a lot more optimally than players that are completely naive to whatever experience you're designing. And some players just I don't know where their ammo goes, but they just use so much. Um
Yeah. I mean, it's
and
also entirely tied to, I mean, it is because you're the maker and you know what's going to happen and stuff, but also
exactly,
you're
yeah.
playing it so much when you're testing.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
I actually came back and I played Fractured Worlds 5 the other day, and I haven't touched that map since I released the set. And I
Hmm.
was actually like running out of ammo in certain areas because
Yeah, you go,
I
yeah.
wasn't using it as efficiently because I didn't remember
Yeah.
how to play the map as well. So
Mm,
it was kind of
mm.
interesting, kind of a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
testing exercise, probably.
And it's also a skill thing as well, obviously. Like, um, you know, and that was another thing I was sort of realizing was like there was definitely a lot of people playing my maps who maybe shouldn't have been at the time.
Yeah.
Like they were definitely punching well above their weight, sort of thing. And I guess to some extent maybe I was as well in hindsight. But like I remember thinking like I finally got all the ammo commanders to stop on the map after I just literally doubled the ammo count in the rooms that they were complaining about. And that seemed to work. I was like, okay, whatever I think is the limited amount of ammo, I'm literally just going to copy and paste all the ammo on the map and just paste it over the top. And that was largely my rule for a while, actually, was just to double whatever I thought was applicable.
Well, there
You
is a
know,
lot of ammo in Sunder for sure, but I wouldn't say it feels absurd. Like, it's not 90s absurd. So it's interesting that it turned out that way, given that you
yeah,
were
yeah.
doubling up.
In a lot of cases, I was, yeah. Like, but yeah, for Grinder, if you've played the other two original Sunder maps, they're very, very similar. They both have
Uh-huh.
brutal openings and like brutal, like just tight combat with just yeah. There's just very little safe space in them, particularly at the start.
Yeah. I think,
Um,
like, as well as sort of the ammo and the beginning of the map and stuff, I think some people also take umbrage with the MIDI a little bit, just because it plays because they're dying so much at the beginning, basically, and then they have to listen to it sort of over and over. Uh, a lot of the early, like now that you're working on Sunder again, do you think you're going to go back and take a look at some of the MIDI usage in the old maps, because it is like original Doom 2 MIDIs and stuff? Or do you think it's like too intrinsic to the identity of those maps at this point?
yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with the MIDI choices overall.
Yeah.
Um, I do have a soft spot for that remix map, remix MIDI in 6.
Yeah.
It's like one of the very, very few times where there's like been a metal MIDI that I've actually quite enjoyed. Like that's sort of been a thing for me. I don't normally enjoy metal MIDIs because they don't sound very sort of rich, because that's a very hard sort of sound to
Hmm.
try and replicate in the format. And I felt that's like one of those rare cases where I thought the author did a pretty good job. Um, yeah, no, I think I'm pretty happy with them overall. Like, I mean, that was one of the MIDIs I think people did mention. The other one that people didn't like was the hollow icon MIDI, I think.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
well,
Interesting.
some people didn't anyway. I think I got a comment from Gorf, if you remember good old Gorf. He
I
he he
do.
he didn't like it. And yeah, Ninety Shields didn't think much, like she didn't think it was appropriate, I think was her
Hmm.
comment.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's always difficult. I feel like when you're making stuff, you tend to avoid the 20 positive comments and then take in the one negative, and then,
Oh, yeah, I would have absolutely done that, and I
yeah,
probably still do to some extent.
yeah. Uh, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to adhere to that.
No, no, no.
So,
No,
map.
there's
Oh, sorry, you go.
No, 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 no.
I was just gonna jump straight into map 7,
Yep, yep.
which maybe one of the strongest maps in the original set for me in terms of like the pacing and the climax of it as
Mm,
well. And it's probably one of the best known in terms of its texture theme. Like I think
yeah.
especially around like a little bit after Sunder came out and it started having this big impact on how people textured their
Mm,
stuff. That
mm.
was sort of the meme I want to say is that people would
Yeah,
reference
yeah.
that texture theme in particular as being the identifying one of Sunder. I was
I,
wondering
I
if you remember like the
yeah.
early stages of designing that
I
map
oh
and like
yeah.
what the
Well,
inspiration
oh
was.
absolutely. Although I would argue that I think also the furnace was the other big
Oh well, I'll get to the
one.
furnace and that texture theme as well.
Yeah.
But
So Hollow Icon, you can play the original in Macabre.
yeah,
In fact, yeah, you'll probably notice straight away that the final room
it's
is
very
literally just
similar. Yeah.
it's actually copy pasted.
Oh, that's
Like
right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But isn't it? I thought it was a bit smaller. Is it not? Or is the whole thing
I
just copy pasted? Maybe I'm misremembering.
just well, that particular room was copy pasted from the Macabre map. Maybe I scaled it. No, I'm not sure.
Mm.
Um, but the original theme for that was yeah. I think I mentioned that old '90s people. Oh man, I'll have to check what that was actually because I only just remembered that's where I got the idea from. Um, and yeah, I had this idea of like this big, great sort of pale sort of temple of some description. And in the original Macabre one, at least, there was like all these like fleshy growths coming out of it and stuff. And I was doing my best to like make these big sort of tentacle sort of shapes, um, which I
Right.
didn't really like, to be honest. Like making big, like nice, convincing tentacles is particularly in Boom is
It
extremely
is very
difficult,
hard. Yeah.
and I definitely was not remotely skilled enough to pull it off. Um, and it's the original Macabre map is not very good. But you can see like the theme is there. This is exactly the same MIDI as well. Um, and yeah, I don't know the MIDI sort of it had. I guess it felt like the map felt like really sort of ethereal to me. It felt very I can't think of the right word off the top of my head right now, but the MIDI just made sense to me. Um,
I
it
mean, yeah, I always thought the MIDI was good for it, personally.
yeah. Um, and yeah, that and then, yeah. So I basically what I did is I copy paste that room. I dumped it down in the center of the map, and then I just started building around it.
Mm.
Um, and I don't remember a lot else about it, like except I do remember the Cacodemon Swarm. I do remember placing that because I remember drawing that room up and thinking, "Oh man, I've got heaps of room for monsters in here. Awesome." And I just remember like copy pasting all the Cacodemons in and all the other stuff and thinking, "That looks like quite a lot actually." Um, and eventually I realized that there was like a lot more than I thought. And
Well,
at
this
some
is.
point,
Wait, are
yeah,
you talking about Pale Monument here, or
yeah,
I was talking about
yeah.
Hollow
Sorry.
Icon Map 7?
Oh, sorry. Oh, Hollow Icon. Oh, sorry. I thought we were talking about Pale Monument.
No,
Oh,
no,
sorry.
no.
Hollow Icon.
I
Oh
was
my God. I
confused. Yeah.
got my. All right. Let's go back then because I was actually talking about Pale Monument.
Yeah,
No,
I was starting to get confused,
ah,
and
yeah,
then you
yeah.
said Kako
No,
Storm, and I was like, wait a second, this is
wait a second.
definitely.
No, no. Is Gazebo getting his own maps mixed up again?
It
Oh man.
happens.
I always yeah. Those are the two. I always get 7 and 8 mixed up. Like in
Yeah.
terms of what order they come in.
I
So
used to have to
7.
look, like, I would have to look at my map names constantly when
Yeah,
I was making.
yeah.
I don't remember any of them either, so.
Yeah, like everything after like sort of 10, I remember. But like between like 3 and 9, I was getting confused. It's been
Hmm.
too long. Um, so Pale Monument, oh my God, Hollow Icon.
Come
I'll get
on.
there eventually. Um, that was inspired, I think, a bit by I think I want to say it was either Alien Vendetta or a Scythe map or something. There was like this hell map with some classic sort of red crosses in it or something along those lines, and I was like, "Oh man, I want to do something with that." And so that little starting room with the glowing crosses, I
Hmm.
just sat down and I that was the first thing I built was just that little room, and it became a bit of a I think for me after that point to like make a starting room in the theme I was gonna explore for the map and like do this like highly detailed room just to start with before like at least doing some block out.
Yeah, I think that's an
And
interesting way to work.
um and yeah, so I sat down and yeah, I sort of did all those crosses and stuff and like, oh, this looks pretty cool. And then just started just yeah, I just started like getting bigger and bigger and bigger rooms, sort of escalate them up. So like I'll be like, oh yeah, this is the next room. It's going to be a bit bigger than the previous one, and I'd sort of yeah draw some bigger shapes and then fill them in, and then yeah, eventually just did the final one, and yeah, just spam the hell out of all sorts of crazy stuff. I can't remember what's in there. I remember there's like a ton of payload elementals in the final room.
Oh yeah, I was
But
gonna say like the final fight of map 7. It's probably like it's the largest scale fight up to that point in the
yes,
WOD.
yeah,
And
by a lot. Yeah.
do you feel like at this point was when you had Sunder down in your mind, like the style of the map and the difficulty of the maps? Because this
Um,
fight definitely feels like it is the beginning of like,
it
okay, now Sunder is Sunder kind of thing.
yeah, I no, I was not thinking that far ahead because I think at that point I don't really think I thought like how far I was going to get with it. Like I don't think I was sort of in my mind committed to 32 maps. I was just committed to as many as I could get done. I think at that point until I ran out of steam or whatever. And like I mean I had the dream of doing the whole 32 megawatt thing as you do when you start out, but um I think with 7 it just there was definitely the start for a lot of things for me, like particularly like drawing random shapes and filling them in with like architecture and combat. Like that would be a big thing for me later on. Like that's something I'd fall back on a lot if I was stuck for ideas. Because the map 7 came together really quickly. Because I don't recall putting like a huge amount of thought into the fights at all. I just remember
Mhm.
just drawing these big rooms and
Do you
making them look
know sort of
cool.
what the average build time would have been for those maps at the time?
Um, the only one I unfortunately the only one I remember the build time on was Furnace, but I want to say like maybe a couple of weeks or something. Like I wasn't
Mm.
doing a lot else, like other than Doom at the time. So I'd probably spend yeah like a few like maybe a week or two. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the build time just
I mean,
slowly
that's pretty
grew
good
on me.
for a Thunder map.
Yeah, well, I mean, it might have been longer. I'm not sure, but it's hard to say. um,
I mean, if you
yeah,
told me that Sunder was actually built by 7 people, I would probably believe you.
yeah. There's a lot of work going into the map, particularly the newer maps. They are
Yeah, a different beast almost.
oh yeah, those are exhausting.
You were about to get into the Kako Swarm, and I was wondering, because that is sort of the big feature of that map in
Yeah.
my mind. So yeah, I guess just when did the concept of the wall of Kako demons kind of pop into your head?
I was still in Hollow Icon, right?
Oh, I thought. Well, I thought
You want to
you.
go? We are going to Pale now. Okay.
Unless you had more to say about Hollow
No,
Icon.
no, 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 no. Yeah. So the Cacoswall Impale Monument was me just drawing that big room and just filling it in and going, oh, and because yeah, just remember testing it, and then I instantly sort of saw how the swarm sort of pushed the player back over the rest of the map. I thought, hey, this could be really cool because they can reach all the way to the other corner that the player's already explored by this point.
Yeah, and it
And
is quite
so,
like an awkward space for anything other than a flying monster, really.
um, because and I thought, oh, I'll lean into this idea, and so it was just yeah, it was like a lot of my sort of stuff, particularly that would come later, it was like a happy accident kind of thing.
Mm.
So I would then go and put the BFG in like further back because originally I think the BFG was closer to the swarm, but when I realized they pushed you back, I realized that like staying and trying to fight them was not going to work for most players. So I figured, well, let's put the BFG back towards the start of the map to sort of indicate to the player, hey, the swarm will come this way. Like, you don't have to try to beat the swarm, over there.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how and well that was communicated. And I think there's also like that. Oh, there's a teleporter as well that teleports between one of the back rooms and like the starting area. Does
Yeah,
that open up during that period? That point? I feel it might. I don't remember though.
I can't remember either.
Neither can I. But because I remember there was just that point where, like, particularly when I was making Grinder, where I had this idea that, yeah, you'd pull like the blob of enemies towards you, and then you'd jump into a teleporter on,
Oh yeah, I
the
love
opposite
that
side.
actually. It's a concept I
Yeah,
really enjoy.
yeah. Well, it's just because like I was getting back into the corner as a player. I'm like, oh, and instead of just like most players, like other mappers, would just delete the monsters, and I'm like, oh, I didn't really want to have to delete them. So instead, I'm like, hang on, well, I'll just put a teleporter in instead, so the players can like jump around the room that way and give them more space.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that. I mean, I used it in Entropy, funnily enough.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so the fight, the fight at the end of Pale Monument,
Yeah,
uh, it has probably one of Sunder's best known line skips, which allows you to kind of neutralize that final encounter by
yeah,
leaving the door open.
yeah.
I know, like, I think Bemuse and Scotty had a list of some bugs, and I'm sure you have a lot of other people that have like sent you things.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you
yeah.
have like what are your plans in terms of fixing them up, and do you have plans for working around demo desync? And it must be tricky.
So my plan was basically to have old Sunder as its thing, just to leave it as it was, and then basically have new versions of Sunder. And um, so for demo, recording people, if they want to do a demo on the newer version, yeah, they can basically say, hey, this is for the version, X of Sunder.
HD remaster, Redux, 4K
Yeah, yeah,
edition. Yeah,
yeah. Final document underscore final.
yeah.
um, I mean, yeah, they sent me a list of like stuff that was definitely broken. And I actually did go through and fix up a lot of stuff. Um, there was some bugs in there that I was like, I wasn't surprised they were there. Like, it was just stuff I just didn't understand because I wasn't watching demos, and I, I'm pretty clear. I'm pretty sure I missed some feedback in the thread as well. I didn't necessarily read every single post. I mean, I think I tried to, but I'm sure there's stuff I missed. I'm sure there would have been. But yeah, line skips were not something I really understood. Um,
Yeah. And
I
I don't think you can do them in Zdoom.
I don't think you can either.
So
No.
yeah, you wouldn't have
Um,
known even if you tried to go for them.
yeah, exactly. There was other like mistakes in like like that stuck cyberdemon. Because I'm pretty sure there is a stuck cyberdemon in that final fight as well.
Right. Yeah, there are
Um,
definitely a few things sort of scattered throughout Sunder that people found throughout speedrunning, like
yeah.
the imps and Hag's finger and stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah. The unkillable imps.
What
um,
what are your like overall feelings about altering these old maps though? Like I mean it must be a
um,
challenge figuring out like what's worth changing and what should stay.
I there was like certain skips. I guess it depended on how the skip worked. Like, some of the skips I was fine with, some not so much. Like, being able to instantly glide out of like precarious, for example, that just skips the whole map
It's
basically.
not a fun
So
speedrun.
not yeah, it's just silly. Like, that can go. That gets I'll block the glide off. Um, there was other little like fixes in some of the later maps, like um, yeah. I mean, we'll probably get to some of these bugs, but yeah, there's bugs in like map 13, 14. Uh,
12 is the
there's
main one I want to talk about, but
okay.
it gets that a bit later.
Okay, well, we'll get to 12. But yeah, I mean, there's no way nobody didn't notice that stuck side with him in map 8, and not tell me.
It was a
I'm,
conspiracy.
yeah, it's a pretty blatant bug. So it must have worked for me at one point. I must have like been able to get 100% kills during one test, and then I bumped a high or changed something after the test and just never noticed.
Well,
That's,
actually, once again, it could be a Z-doomism, right? Because I think it
oh
pushes
yeah,
thing monsters out when they're stuck. I don't know if it always does it, but it
yeah,
definitely
no,
does to
actually, you're probably right.
yeah.
Because that when I came back to Sunder, yeah, that was something I encountered again later on.
Mhm.
Was that yeah, GZ Doom as it was later on would was very generous with stuck stuff and would yeah force things apart to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. Baited by a Z-doom again.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, so map 9, the cage. It's
yeah,
a very unique map, and I suppose this is where we'll get to the big Zedomisms, because I wanted to talk
yeah.
to you about sort of building that map around the verticality and Doom, and sort of your playtesting process for it, and I guess yeah, like you said, you were using free look, and
Yep.
I don't know if you were using no infinite height back then as well, but I wonder how much all of that kind of influenced the
Yeah.
structuring of the cage.
I did not know Infinite Height existed back then at all. um, like, I think I might have eventually seen some recordings of people using it and just being like, why would people use that? That's so strange. Um, but like the cage started as a Macabre map. You can see the original version of it in yeah that one.
Mhm.
It was a lot more simple. I basically sort of grabbed the same concept. I grabbed one of the pillars from it, I think, rebuilt the pillar, copy pasted it. Because yeah, the original concept of the map was like an actual sort of gigantic cage that sort of spanned this like great sort of chasm. And the idea was like there'd been this great beast sort of housed in it at one point, and now there's like just sort of structures built around the cage itself, sort of thing.
Mhm.
And you know, in my mind, it was actually initially it was actually more like a Quake sort of map. It was like had a lot more like thin walkways over the top of other walkways because like the bars would be like
Uh huh.
hovering above like the canyon and over the lava or whatever. And
So it was built
um,
for jumping, is what you're saying.
uh, I don't think I had picture jumping, but more like traversing these sort of tight ropes like across these canyons. But you know, stuff but you could see under it and stuff like that. I think
Yeah,
was,
sure.
but you know, for whatever reason, to make that sort of cage, I just copy and pasted all those big pillars and decided to just build structures around the pillars. And because of like the tight sort of shapes that go around the pillars, I found myself quite sort of restricted. So yeah, there was heaps of like really steep staircases and some lifts um and that's yeah, I started playing with verticality a fair bit and actually like as other people might have guessed by map 7, I wasn't very good at like progression signaling when I
Mm.
made those maps. It wasn't really something on my radar was to make it obvious where to go. Like
Well, the cage really, I mean, that it just suffers because it was, I suppose, built more around free look. So
it was also
yeah.
built quite early on as well.
Uh huh.
Like Cage was built before oh god, I want to say that was built before a lot of the other maps. I think I might have even I don't know if it was like the very first like big map I started for Sunder, like but it was one of the very early ones.
Mhm.
Um and a lot of the bizarre choices for like the fights and all the other issues it has are definitely like me as a very new mapper sort of running into the issues that trying to force yourself to map around these sorts of restrictions will you know you'll run into these problems basically
Yeah.
um, and it's like out of all the original maps it's the one where I look at like most of the fights in it and think oh man, I kind of want to rebuild like the layout a bit. Like I'd obviously keep the theme and everything else about it
Yeah.
intact, but I'd want to rebuild like most of the fights in it, with a few exceptions. I think there's a couple of decent fights in there, but
The
There's like
mastermind fight at the end is good. I like that.
yeah, like that one's pretty good, and I think I vaguely recall there's like a cross fight with like some lava in the middle or something, and you got to like time some invulnerabilities or something.
The cyber pinky fight.
Maybe.
Or oh no, yeah, the
Oh
little
no no
middle, the
no.
small fight, yeah, in the middle with the
Yeah
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I
I
remember
kind
that
of like
one.
that one. The cyber pinky one's quite silly.
It was fun though.
Yeah. Um, and people always get lost around that point because there's like a a platform you've got to lower that looks exactly the same as all these other ones you can't lower. There's no indication that you can do it unless you press use on it.
Well, yeah, it must be interesting with a map like that, thinking about what you'd want to change because you're talking about progression markers and things.
Yeah,
Presumably, that would be your main focus, is just making
yeah,
it a bit easier to traverse. But then
yeah.
there's also, I don't know if there are. I'm not really familiar with the UV max for Cage very much. I'm not sure if there are problems with monsters getting knocked off or like anything you'd have to do with
Oh,
that or
probably.
yeah.
I'd assume there's like I think I went through and fixed some of the most egregious stuff in that particular area, as best as I could anyway. But it's such it's one of those things where I'd want to rip it apart if I really wanted to fix it properly. Like you'll notice like to help like this I know the bit that you want to bring up is the little staircase that you've got to go down.
Yeah, I do remember it.
Which if you've got free look on, you're like, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I just look
there
down.
there it
There it
is.
is.
There it is. But if you don't, like a lot of the players didn't at the time, you're gonna walk past that like, probably at least a dozen times before you accidentally find it. Either by just giving up and looking at the auto map and going, hang on, what's this? Or just by
Hmm.
accidentally falling down the stairs.
Well, Infinite Height is really weird in that one too because of all the torches. So like the cackers tend to get like
Ah,
stuck behind the torches, and
yeah,
it makes all
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
fights
yeah,
play very doorway campy and weird in that
yeah,
early
yeah,
section.
yeah,
But obviously that wasn't
yeah.
intended.
No, and it was
Uh,
definitely also made during that period where like I'm like you, I like the big grindy sort of stuff.
yeah.
I love like just yeah, and there's definitely some grindy stuff in that map.
Oh, well,
But
yeah. Sorry, you
it's not
you
as
can go.
yeah. It's funny like because that was like yeah, that little staircase was actually one of the things brought up by Bemused and the other fellas.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, what do I do? It is a mouse look issue. I can either completely redesign the staircase so you can see it. In the end, I actually put a trail of health bonuses down, and I think I was like,
That's the solution in Doom.
that'll do. Like, it's not great. And the thing is, it didn't really work very well. Um, like I remember somebody else playing it for the first time and pick up his health bonuses, and they just kept on going. They like it wasn't a trail to them; it was just a couple of health bonuses sitting there. It's like, damn it.
Yeah, that does happen sometimes.
Ah,
You can lead a horse to water and all that.
yeah, yeah. No, like that's something I've learned, particularly in like the recent sort of like 12, 24 months of mapping, is like make your progression as obvious as you humanly can.
No, I
Um,
refuse.
but there is also definitely a lot of fun uh, when it comes to exploration and understanding progression as well. Like um, you want like I think it depends on the map largely. I think with Sunder I've got a bit of wriggle room when it comes to you know obtuse progression. Um, but for example, mapping for Age of Hell, for example, I want to make sure that the players never truly lost, or as little as possible anyway.
Hmm.
Um, but I there is definitely maps out there that are built on figuring out the actual progression. Where do I go next, and making that interesting. And Magnolia being one of the obvious examples. And another one I played recently was called Old Still Life.
Yeah, yeah.
That's another one that's got some very obtuse progression in it, but that was a lot of fun actually figuring out, okay, what do I do next?
Well, I think
Um,
it's a tricky balance, but I think a lot of it
yeah,
comes down to it's all about like preparing the player's expectations, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
exactly.
this WOD is going to have obscure progression, and like you put that
Yeah,
on Front Street for them, and then they're like,
yeah,
okay, I have to look
yeah,
around for where to go in this WOD.
yeah. And I think
You know?
particularly with like going back to like Hollow Icon, I think that's one of the first like switch hunty kind of maps to a large degree. Like I think it's like
Mm.
the first map I see people. Oh, actually no, Precarious probably in terms of the actual order, but because I think both of those maps was where I ran into this problem where I was only using the vanilla actions and I wanted to keep players stuck in rooms for extended periods. And the way I initially did it was to well, there was the long blockers in map 9, obviously, but I also was doing the whole like force the player to zigzag across the room
Mhm.
thing where you'd be multiple switches, and the only way to hit all of them would be to zigzag across the arena in
Yeah.
some fashion. Um, and by forcing them to do that, they wouldn't just be able to like whack the switches and run out too easily. And I still use that trick to some degree. But it does unfortunately also mean the player can't leave when they want to leave. They've got to go find those bloody switches.
Well, I'm a big fan of the switch in Doom in general. I don't know. There's something
Yeah.
satisfying about pressing a switch,
Oh
and
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
feels. I mean, my maps are very switch heavy in general, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm on board for switches personally. But some
Yeah,
people
yeah.
definitely uh, get a little salty about having to press a bunch of switches, I think.
Yeah, like there's some players do not like navigating at all. Like it's just not their thing. And
Imagine
it's
that's the hill you die on. Just I
you know,
don't enjoy navigating.
yeah, like and you'll see like some players just the second they don't know where to go, like they can't find a switch,
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
they're like, this is the worst day of my life. I can't find this switch. This is the worst map. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, hang on. Oh no, there's a switch. Okay, I'll carry on now.
I've
That
seen
that
yeah, I've seen this a number of times. There were
yeah, yeah.
moments in Fractured Worlds where like I would watch people playing the maps on streams or whatever, and it would be
Mm,
switches that were not obscure at all. Like it was
no.
right next to where you needed to go, but they just wouldn't
Yep.
press it, and they'd run around in the opposite direction 20 times.
Yep.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I watched in map there's a switch in map 16 actually in Sunder where I watched a player on stream like walk not only like there's an alcove with the switch in it to start this fight, and they every single time they walked at the alcove they turned away from it every single time.
it's brutal.
And then eventually after a while they pulled out the audio map because they just couldn't figure it out. And then they found it. They're like, how did I miss this? Like they were just baffled. And yeah, I don't know how they managed that. They just never ever looked. They basically never turned right or left at this
Well,
particular juncture. It was bizarre.
maybe they
And
couldn't turn right, Gazebo.
maybe their mouse was broken just briefly.
Yeah, they weren't an ambi turner, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so you sort of talked a little bit about grindy gameplay and enjoying that
Mm.
throughout. Hag's Finger, I would say, is probably
Yeah.
if I think
Yeah.
about grind in Sunder, that is the map with that
Yeah.
huge wave of Hell Knights in it.
Yeah.
So like you
Uh,
do you think this stems from like Holy Hell and stuff, or is this from
yeah.
other games, or like do you enjoy a bit of grind in your gameplay?
I during that period I definitely did. And and I just remember thinking about a fight to put in the area, and I just remember thinking, um, oh man, like those grindy fights can get pretty sort of taxing for the player. Like,
Hmm.
they can get pretty exhausting after a while. What if that was the fight? I remember thinking this. I I don't know if I remember thinking it was a good idea, but I remember thinking, what if the grind was the fight? Like, what if the fight wasn't actually that difficult? It was more about just not falling asleep. Like, and I'm so yeah, I just made some very, very big monster closets, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, we'll see how people respond to that. And most of the replies were, you know, wow, there's so many Hell Knights in this one section. I'm like, is that good or bad? And that was sort of I got these like really ambivalent responses. It
Mhm.
was just like, wow, there's so many of them, you know, and and it wasn't until like when I was Derek player, like, like, oh, maybe last year, I think, for the first time, or maybe the year before that, whenever he played it. And he's just like, this is just bad. Like, I, I remember thinking, oh,
Well, I disagree.
what?
I
I,
actually you have to be in the mood for it, but I get really
yeah,
into like the zone with grind and
uh-huh, uh-huh,
like Holy Hell in particular. I had so much fun playing that one. It was exactly what I
yeah,
wanted to play. You got
there
that
you
perfect
go.
dark MIDI rocking in the background.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Ah,
perfect.
Perfect
I
Dark
love
was
it.
it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
Well,
Chicago streets in a perfect
well,
dark, I think.
we'll have to talk about Holy Hell later because I have some Holy Hell news.
Oh, is
Yeah,
this post
yeah.
podcast talk? This is too secret.
No, 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 no. I'm fairly sure I'm allowed to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
It has been mentioned in some places, in some public discords, so
Uh,
um, I should be able to talk about it. Um,
Exciting.
yeah,
Well, I mean, we'll get to that maybe.
yeah. Um,
So map 11, which we did talk about earlier, and this was exactly the thing
yeah.
I wanted to talk about. In fact, was
Mm,
I think it's probably like the most copied texture theme I've ever seen in Doom.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
been
yeah,
recycled like 1,000 times for Slaughter Woods. Like
yeah.
SF 2011 and 2012 inevitably have like 40 maps that just look like
Mm,
Sunder, map
yeah.
11, Furnace. Talk to me about the theme of the map, how it came
So
about, and like what
I
your
had,
opinions are on like why it might have like captured people's imaginations.
uh, so um, I remember the idea for the furnace was, yeah, it was basically going to be just like this gigantic metal map around like these big sort of like lava-y sort of cauldrons, like these gigantic sort of cauldrons, which never made it into the map in the end. Um, and the start was more or less how I envisioned it. You'd drop down into this great big sort of metal sort of structure. Um, and I'm like, okay, I need some new metal textures. And I eventually found like a Quake like texture pack somewhere, and I was going through them like, oh, that metal texture is really cool. Let's just play with that. And I remember like spamming it a bit and realizing, oh, it's like 64 by 64. It's exactly the right size for the flat. Oh, it's because I'd already sort of started to do some little sort of cubey sort of shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I sort of put that in the flat sort of thing and started drawing some cubes. And I was like, oh, this looks cool. And I made that like that big opening area was like yeah, like I remember making that one of the first things I did, like was that big I just sort of just made this huge room. I didn't really sort of think about it too hard, and then I started drawing like those cube shapes and like I remember even like I wasn't actually even at home when I made the map. I remember I was actually on holiday and um my I was my cousin wanted me to stay at his place for like a week or a week and a half or something. He's like, you gotta come over. I'm like, oh, all right. Oh, and you've got to bring your PC with you. I want to play some, I want to nick some stuff. He basically just wanted some like stuff that was on my hard drive or something. And I was like, yeah, all right. And I convinced my parents to take my PC with me and on the trip, and off we went. And I remember sitting down, like, because I think he was working full time, so I had the house myself. Um, yeah, for a lot of it, and yeah, I just sat down at maps like nonstop, and Venice came together really quickly. It was like a week, I think.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember it was a week because that was how long I was at his house. And I remember just like being completely in the zone while I was mapping for it. Like it was like the first time I'd like really thought about um like using a lot of the light gradients in that particular way and using like sector merging and to speed up the process a
Hell yeah.
bit and just little things like that. And yeah, it just came together really quickly. Um and I remember thinking, yeah, I remember thinking, yeah, this looks pretty cool. Like I didn't think that much of it at the time. Like I remember being happy with how it looked, but not to the point where I thought like multiple people would end up like just copying the idea.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, it's a really obvious one. I mean, flats in that format can't go above 64 by 64, and you want to when you're drawing sort of shapes and you want to make those shapes look convincing, um, having the edge, like the highlights and the shadows of textures lining up on the edges of those shapes makes them look more convincing. And so the cube is just such an obvious one because it's going to line up with, you know, the flat alignment like perfectly. And yeah, it's just one of those things that it's very easy to draw and it just looks really cool. And again, it just came down to me just messing around with textures and stuff like
Hmm.
I did a lot of. And
Yeah. I mean, I think also Doom is a boxy game by default. You know, the hitboxes are boxy. The textures are structured around you
mm,
know, anywhere from 8 to 64 grid sizes.
they
Uh,
are. But what's interesting though, you say that, but you look at like the iWads original one, like a lot of those like a lot of the sections of those maps, even do one. There's a lot of like weird angles and stuff going on in those.
yeah, well, they didn't worry as
And
much about alignment, I guess, as people did later on.
no,
Yeah, for
they
sure.
they definitely didn't. And
And
to be
Plutonia was
fair,
built in a completely
yeah.
different editor that used fives and tens instead of instead
Oh,
of the eight standard. So if you
oh
look at
really?
Plutonia maps,
Ah,
their stuff is actually built in like weird increments because of the way their editor worked.
oh, right. That explains a lot actually. I did not know that. Ah,
Yeah,
right,
but it
right,
gives like
yeah.
kind of a distinct feel, I guess, in certain
Yeah, it
places.
does. It does. Yeah, absolutely. Um, all right. But yeah, yeah, no, the furnace came together really quickly. I think the only part of the map that I was a bit disappointed with was there's the infamous platforming section,
Yep.
but below the platforming, you fight around the platforms initially. Down below, there's like a bunch of like revenants and cyber demons and stuff. Uh,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
particularly it's
It's
not
like a little
particularly
small
exciting.
cube
Yeah, it
room.
is.
Yeah, yeah, I
Well, it's
remember that
not.
fight.
Oh, it's a really big room, but
Oh, okay.
um, it's
Oh,
basically
yeah, yeah. No, I know.
yeah, you know the one I mean, yeah. And I wanted to do some interesting complex fight down there, but I remember becoming really worried about performance at that point, um, just because of how much other stuff was already in the room, including I think I might have even already started to place the stuff up the top too. Um, so I eventually was like just so terrified if I put in like the kind of fight I wanted to that I just didn't. I just left those little groups of enemies in and just never changed it. um,
Yeah.
And yeah, I can remember. In fact, yeah, I remember like I knew the MIDI I wanted to use as well. I'd had that MIDI in my head for a long, long time after the Scythe 2 map that uses it, where Mr. X is introduced.
Yeah, my arch nemesis.
Yeah, oh god, those things are amazing. Uh, were you a fan of Mr. X?
No, I hated Mr. X.
I loved Mr. X. I liked him. I
As a
I just found him.
non-Doom deathmatcher, I just had no nostalgia for the concept, I guess. Like, there was
It's
nothing about it where I was like, this jives with Doom for me.
oh right. Well, for me, I didn't deathmatch either, but he was just such a different idea for an enemy for me. Like he was just so removed from all the other sorts of monster roles because he was just so absurdly fast.
I think it
Um,
just had too much health was my main issue.
maybe I just remember like luring him into like super shotgun blasts and just hoping I didn't miss. Um, but I just found him like yeah, a very tense enemy to fight, like something that was quite scary and
I think that was the idea. Like, I think it was the idea. Like,
yeah,
I think the whole like I think Eric Elm liked deathmatch and stuff, and
sure,
that's why they
yeah,
were in to replicate
yeah,
because they move at the
yeah.
same speed
Oh
as
yeah,
you do. So
yeah, they do, yeah, yeah, and no, I really like them actually. Um,
Can't wait
I
to see
it,
them in map
oh,
21 of Sunder.
oh man, it is actually a miracle they never got in, to be honest.
I would
Like,
have to stop playing the one.
it's all right. I'll give them a slightly different name, tint them a little bit,
Mr.
and
Y.
Mr. Y or like Mr. Z,
Yeah,
and then give them like a I don't know, a super shotgun or something.
please don't. Um, so map 12, I said I would get to this earlier on.
Yeah,
Basically, the speed run for that map is sort of constructed around entirely around this vial jump at the beginning,
yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
grabs the yellow key and lets them get the
Mm,
BFG
mm.
super early. With like secret sequence breaks like that. Um, like how I mean, I suppose it's solved for you by like you're saying you want to make two separate versions of the map, but with that one in particular, it's such a big part of that speed run.
Yeah.
Uh, like, do you think like, oh, maybe I should leave that one in, and then I will take some of the other ones out, and stuff like
Yeah, yeah.
that?
It's definitely like a pick and choose kind of
Yeah,
workflow for me, and I like that skip a lot
yeah, me too.
because like it because of the way the map sort of opens up on that side. And I don't know, it just makes the runs like really interesting that you can just instantly grab the BFG and then start opening up other parts of the map that you normally couldn't. Um, yeah, no, I remember seeing it and I just liked the skip like straight away. I couldn't tell you why, but it appealed to me. I think partly was because yeah, I think it was just because yeah, the map still worked pretty well. It just you know, it just played a lot faster. And allowed yeah, to cut down a lot of the like some of the slightly grindier sort of fights.
Mhm.
Um, no, I really like that one, but I just yeah, some skips that I don't like. Like I prefer not then not to be like line skips, for example. I don't like those too much. Um,
Yeah, I suppose the problem is that they speed fights up in weird ways a lot of the time, where it really
yeah.
just turns the like it neutralizes the fight, but it doesn't speed it up in like a fun way. I suppose a lot of the time.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like like if you're going for like a UV max on map 12, you know, you're still going to go for the BFG, like skip straight away. But it's yeah, it doesn't really. I don't. It doesn't to me. It doesn't hurt the flow of the map too much. Because yeah, there's still tons of stuff that you've got to kill and BFG and stuff anyway. So
Yeah.
and it's not necessarily gonna trivialize the encounters at all.
Well, it lets
There's
you sort of fold encounters into each other as well, which
yeah, yeah,
can
exactly.
be like. I mean, that's I think one of the more fun aspects of speedruns and seeing
Mm,
people do that. I think the Pale Monument one is pretty similar, where the whole map is kind of tackled in this big lump.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I don't mind that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um,
So,
and
oh, sorry.
mm, no, no, no,
I was just gonna get to map 13, which
yeah,
is probably one of my favorites in the set, especially texture theme wise. It
oh yeah,
has like this super oppressive start, and I think it was probably like a pretty huge influence on maps texture wise in terms of like this focus on color accents, and you have
mm,
this gothic metal aesthetic, which I think a lot of people drew from. Was
mm,
the like the use of color accenting a big moment for you when you build that map? Is it
yeah.
something that you sort of then were like, okay, I kind of want to
I
use this theme more going forward?
so somewhere I've still got the original screenshot of the opening room from map 13, and it does not look at all like that. I
Hmm.
basically wanted to do like a curvy, accented sort of dark rock sort of map. Like it was always called Obsidian Nightmare, and originally I was using like a dark black rock texture from Hexen, I think it was from, maybe Heretic. And I did up the first room like I normally did, and I decided I hated it. I was like, I this does not look great to me. And so I saved it, dumped it in a file somewhere. I don't know. God knows where it's gone. And then just started again. And because the whole point of that map, yeah, was like to mess around with the curve tool and just try to figure out how to do like snaking sort of structures and things like that. Because I'd seen a bunch of them in, I think, probably in Day Vault, I think, and I hadn't
Yeah.
really ever tried to figure out how he'd got those sorts of things to line up. And I did my best to try to get them all to line up. I can see like where I ran into problems back then because I didn't quite know how to do it properly. But yeah, no, I eventually remember just yeah experimenting with like a lot of those sort of textures and colors and yeah, I just sort of almost accidentally came across like those little like sort of pits in the ground with the recolored Sean textures on them. They're like dotted around the map. Um,
Yep.
you know the ones I mean. And
Mhm.
yeah, I remember thinking, oh, this looks really cool. I'm gonna use these everywhere. And then yeah, I ended up finding that metal texture as well. And I think you see that. Oh, is that in map 4 as well? That one
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe.
Because I did actually originally have like another metal map in mind in Macabre. In fact, I think if you load up like map 7 or 8 in Macabre, there's like a texture with that. Sorry, a map with that texture spammed all over it. It's like a single room, I think. Um, and you can see like my first attempts at like drawing like cubes or cubey sort of shapes back then. Except they're like 32 by 32.
Mhm.
Anyway, it's funny like how those little shapes in the ground like block the monsters as well.
Yeah,
Like
I
they
was gonna
can't.
ask actually as a follow
Yeah,
up, like, was that considered as part of gameplay, or were the monsters sort of placed after the space was built?
I it's pretty embarrassing actually. I didn't even notice initially. Like I didn't even notice they were blocking the
Oh,
monsters
right.
like that much. I sort of just like blurred like through a lot of the testing. Like I don't remember paying a huge amount of attention to it at the time. And then yeah, there was a comment of like, "Oh man, this is really cool. I like how these are blocking the monsters. That looks intentional." I'm like, "Yeah, definitely."
Yeah, I mean that's what it's
And
like a lot of the time.
it is. You know, you sort of experiment and create these sort of yeah, it's these happy accident sort of moments. And Map 13 was definitely a lot of that. Um, and I mean, the other thing I remember from 13 was the final room. I ran into the same problem I had back in Precarious where the editor was just dying, and I
Right.
wanted to
Yeah.
have like those little light gradient patterns off like every single little like cube in the room,
Oh.
and I got pretty far with them until I eventually gave up. Eventually, I was just like,
It
"This is
is,
just
yeah, it's really bad. Breathless had the exact same problem. I did actually sort of figure out to split that one, but I know
yeah,
what you
yeah,
mean.
yeah,
Basically, like you build a sector and it takes ages to like resolve it. Like
yeah,
it won't
exactly, yeah,
complete the
yeah,
sector, and it'll just sort of
yeah,
hang for a
yeah,
while after each
yeah." You've got to
drawing.
wait several seconds after drawing each sort of sector, and it just gets slower and slower and slower, and it yeah, it just becomes infuriating because you're just trying to draw what is a very basic shape, and it's just taking forever. Um,
I think I was also fully building nodes for each save. I wasn't using the quick node saving, so I think that was
uh,
also a contributing factor.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
But
And
but yeah.
mm,
I would imagine you ran into more problems with map 14 when you got to it. So I suppose my question about map 14 specifically was that, I mean, it was never meant to be the final map in the project, obviously,
no,
and I think from memory you've said that it was meant to be like a bit longer than it is, because it does feel
yeah.
like it ends a bit abruptly. What were your like original plans for the map?
Um, so the two major things that changed was you'll see like the first section of the map has got a lot of little tiny honeycombs, which jumps into like a lot of the bigger ones.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to continue the little honeycomb patterns across the map a lot more. but it was so tedious,
Yeah.
copying, pasting, all that stuff. And the editor was dying as well. It was not happy with me. And in fact, that reminds me, there was like, it was because of the furnace that one of the node builders actually got updated or something like that. Because or something related to a port or something, some code actually had to be updated to get the furnace to actually load because I actually hit the limit while I was building it. And I remember I was literally building the exit area when I hit it as well.
Right.
And I remember like going to going to Doom and go, oh, what's causing this to happen? I don't understand. And someone's like, okay, I never expected anybody to hit that, but you've hit the limit.
The
Let me
side
fix that.
def limit was it at the time?
It might have been, yeah, yeah. Like, because it wasn't working in the editor, okay. It was just when I tried to load the map up in game,
Mm-hmm.
or tried to compile the nodes or something, that it just kept crashing. And yeah, I'd hit the first sort of limit back then, mm. And yeah, going back to Hive Mother, I I wanted to keep doing a lot of those little honeycombs like everywhere because I was really happy with that sort of pattern, and that had been the idea of this big um, hive in the side of like a mountain that you're exploring. And um, yeah, I did have the idea of a bee enemy back then, if you're wondering. Um, in fact, for map 10, there was going to be a hag at the top at one point as well, until I realized how hard it was to A, make new sprites, and B, like the hack just looked terrifying to me. So
Yeah.
I gave up. I gave up on the idea. Um, the other thing I wanted to do in Hive Mother, there's that section towards the end where you get the final key and you drop down that sort of really long golden shaft into like that black area. And there's just a couple of little like hexagon platforms in like a black void and the key and a teleporter.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing else down there. There was originally going to be like a whole extra area down there.
Ah.
Like a big fight on some honeycombs in the dark and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get it to look right. I think it was because I didn't know about light transfers. I think
Ah. Right. Yeah.
it might have been that might have been the issue, but whatever it was, I eventually gave up. I just left the key in there and called it a day, basically.
Is that
Um,
something now that you're looking at and you're like, well, in this new version of Sunder, I can go back and add on these things that I want to do? Or do you think
um,
your style has changed too much now to add to those maps and make it feel
mm,
like coherent?
I think I could probably pull it off, but I don't think I'd want to. Like I'm fairly
Yeah.
happy with that map.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, there's like nothing majorly wrong with it.
Well,
Well, okay.
there is there is the
There is
death things.
there is the death exit like misclick. Yes, that is fixed. That has been fixed for a while now.
Probably one of the funniest.
That is one of the funniest like misclicks of like all like the things I could have like accidentally hit. I just happened to accidentally hit that one. Like I must have just like been, just casually skimming through, the sector effects and gone, oh yeah, there's the damage one, just click
Well,
and
because I
just
think it even says 10 or 20% and exits level.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's pretty
yeah,
easy to pick the wrong one, to be honest, if you're
yeah.
working
So,
quick.
and you can imagine like my confusion because the first time I saw that bug, it wasn't someone using it to exit the map. Instead, they actually used it as an invulnerability to protect themselves against cyber splash.
Huh.
So like like you can't die while you're in one of those. You can only get reduced to 1%. But if you're not like actually in the sector, like completely, it won't exit either.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody used that during a speed run to like just sit there and just take cyber demon rockets while everything can fight it to death.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty cool.
And yeah, I was like, oh wow, what the hell? And I remember looking and going, oh man, that's one hell of a misclick.
Yeah. I think a lot of people found it by accident. I think I found it by accident.
Yeah, yeah. I did not know it was there until I returned,
Because
basically.
it's pretty easy to fall in, actually, when you're trying to
Yeah,
make the jump across.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Um, mm,
Sorry, did you have more to add?
I think that's it.
Hmm.
Um,
I suppose I was gonna get to sort of now that it's past the original 14. I was gonna
mm,
get to the elephant in the room a little bit, which is
yeah,
you disappeared for quite some time,
yeah, I did. Yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
after
yeah,
map 14 came out. And I guess a lot of people are probably just curious, like what made you lose interest in
yeah.
doom mapping around that time.
There's like a couple of main reasons. Like one was, I I suspect like my mental health at the time could have been better. Like there was definitely like a personal sort of element to it,
Hmm.
where I just was I wasn't in a great headspace, and but that there was like another reason as well, and that was like the mapping community in general at the time. Like it was sort of this two prong thing where I really wanted to see certain Doom maps being made at the time, and I was basically making the maps that I wanted to see more of, and which is basically highly detailed slaughter maps.
Yep.
And there was not a lot of that. I remember like distinctly seeing like Doom the way it did, like that project that came up around that time. And I remember thinking, oh man, more of that stuff.
This is very,
Ah,
not to cut you off, but this is hilarious because I talked to Danny Babinga
yeah,
as well, and he
yeah.
cites Doom the Way did for similar reasons in terms of like that's why Sunlust they made Sunlust. That's one of the big reasons was
There you
because
go.
as like a counter to that kind of gameplay. So it's
There
kind
you
of
go.
interesting that it comes up
It's
again.
it's really funny because yeah, I just remember just seeing how popular that was at the time, and even Romero jumped in, and I'm like, at least for me, I was like, I want to push the engine a bit. I want to make stuff that we haven't seen before, and this is for me. It was just retreading old ground,
Yeah.
and that was not exciting to me at all.
Hmm.
And and yeah, I just remember. I think I must. Yeah, I was also just a bit burnt out at the time, and I just wanted new stuff to play that I found exciting, and there wasn't really much out there at the time. Like there was, I was. It's funny looking back that all the stuff I'd hoped to at least inspire or like at least just encourage was right around the corner. Like it
Yeah.
was like people were working on stuff behind, and I just had no idea. Um, and that was the big shock. Like it was when I was in this other sort of casual gaming Discord, um, playing with like some other South Australians. I think we were largely playing Overwatch at the time because that was the game everybody was playing. And um, I mentioned offhand I made some Doom maps like years ago to this guy there, and I can't remember who. Like I think I suggested he stream them just jokingly. Like I just told him, yeah, they're really hard. You'll die a lot or something like that.
Hmm.
And he said, "Oh, bugger it, I'll give it a go. That sounds fun." And he did. And I, I can't remember if he got past map one. Um, and yeah, Bemused jumped into chat and say, "Oh man, is this a real gazebo?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, that's me." And he's like, "Oh my god, I'm like a huge fan and stuff and all this." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
What? Like I was just like really taken aback by it, and yeah, it was. That was about the point where I actually walked back at the community for the first time in years to see what had actually been going on, and yeah, like all the things I'd hoping to have seen in the mapping community had happened, and yeah, like the first Doom Discord I joined was the abandoned Discord. Um,
Yeah.
that yeah,
Well, yeah. I
and
mean, it was very strange because I remember Bemused like messaged a bunch of us and because we
yeah,
had a Discord. I can't remember if it was in the abandoned one or another one, but he was like, "Oh, I've found like gazebo like in this Doom stream,"
like
and
it's like a
like,
like a precious treasure you find in like a lost
well,
temple.
I don't think you get that like people have been looking for you for years. Like they were trying to contact you on Doomworld. They were trying to like find you on other places. Like you leaving was like a big hole in the community for sure for people who liked
Yeah,
that kind of gameplay because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you were like sort of the godfather of this genre in a lot of ways with Sunder. So
Yeah, and for me, like looking like my maps at the time, I didn't consider them that amazing. I was happy with them. Like I was fairly proud of them, but I was not like the idea that they had actually like inspired parts of the community to, imitate them and do all that sort of stuff. Just yeah, I didn't think that they would do anything like that at all. That was quite a shock.
mm. Yeah, because I still remember. Yeah, I'm pretty sure like Bemused messaged you, and then I think I sent you a couple of
Yeah,
messages, and then we like dragged you onto Discord basically to.
yeah,
We were like, we
no,
gotta secure
secure the
Gazebo, make
gazebo.
sure he's back.
And yeah, like, and when I realized that, you know, how much people would enjoy my stuff, I'm like, man, like, I should pull out Doom Builder again because I there was actually this brief moment where I actually did almost come back. Um,
Hmm. I
like
was gonna ask you if you'd worked at all on anything,
I
or
started the original Babylon's Chimera. Um,
yeah.
like I map 15 was always going to be Babylon of some description. That was always going to be the theme. Uh, like basically my interpretation of the Tower of Babel was the original concept. And I think I've still got the original work of this tower that made like Hag's finger look small. It never would have worked. Um,
Well, the map 15 is a story in and of itself.
well, yeah, and so with map 15, yeah, I just jumped in the Discord with all these new people I didn't know, and yeah, just started mapping again. And like I mean, there was a lot of experimentations early on and messing around. Like I remember, like I might have been bemused actually testing out because I was like, hang on, how big textures can I import to Doom now? What's the limit? Because I wanted to do these big murals and stuff, and
Is
and
Mega in that Discord? I can't remember, but Mega had definitely been
uh,
messing around with gigantic textures around that time.
might have been
So
Mega. Well, hang on, I still got that Discord, believe it or
yeah,
not.
I'm not
I
sure.
haven't. Yeah, Mega's in it.
It
It
might
could
have
have
been
been.
him then, because I remember
Yeah,
he had
yeah.
been messing around with it for something else, and he
There you
had,
go.
yeah, he was doing like 512 by 512 stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was like, can I go bigger than that? And Deb was like, I don't know, maybe. And we discovered the upper limit was enormous.
Yeah, it's
Like,
huge.
like it was well way past what you'd ever need. Before finally, like PR boom started like breaking like in that regard. And I think it was you got a little bit of like a 2D fruity effect actually.
Hmm.
Once you got past whatever the limit was, but it was in the thousands. Like you'd never need anything that big. Which is funny because I did actually start making something like bigger than that I was going to cut up for map 15. Because I mean, yeah, I was just so sort of energized and ready to, return with a bit of a splash. And
Yeah, I mean, I
man,
remember. Yeah, I mean, it was a very big thing, and I
it
remember in the
was, yeah,
Discord, like,
yeah.
because I remember when you built the map finally, and we started playtesting it. I mean,
Oh
I was
man,
like, holy shit, it's a new Sunder map, but also it was like, holy shit, we need
yeah.
to
There was
figure out
also,
how to make this map run a little bit better, because
yeah, yeah. There was all sorts of problems with it, and like there was this big vista I really wanted to keep, but there was just I was really hoping that we could get the reject table stuff working properly.
yeah, because I think we
And
sent it off to Rubik's, and Rubik's built a reject table.
I actually was DMing him in Doom Mode actually at the time, and he'd basically written a script that would auto generate just the reject table for me, and I could just dump that lump into the wad.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, no, he was very helpful. Thanks, Rubix. Um, and yeah, but yeah, there was that. There's the down the bottom of the map is the Indian stepwell, and that part where you look across to the other part of the map, like in the very original version, well, now there's a big wall in the way because that was just basically the only way I could get the map running better. Um, and even then, there's like one section that's still the performance is just bad, and it was I mean, the map was me relearning a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a lot of stuff I'd forgotten not to do. Um, and it sort of all slowly came back to me as the map progressed, and I realized like most of the way through it, I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have designed the map like this.
It's
Um,
definitely layout wise, it's very strange, really. Like again, lots of verticality, almost like the cage, but not in a
mm,
bad way. Like,
mm,
uh, it does it in kind of cool ways where there's like huge drop downs and massive lifts that you go up, and
yeah,
it does
yeah,
give it like a unique sense of scale in Doom, I think.
yeah. Because I'm like so I just I realized that the two things that my maps that were known for, and one thing, well, there's things I like doing. I like making big vertical maps, and I like making them big. And I'm like, well, let's make more of that. And I just went bananas, and I
A little
distinctly
too
remember,
bananas, maybe. But
yeah, no, I definitely went a bit overboard. And I just remember like um in the beginning of that Discord and thinking, do I reveal the community I'm back? What do I do?
I
And
think we talked about it a
we
little
did a
bit.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
we did. And then eventually I said, oh bugger it, I'm just gonna like, oh, that's right. I couldn't even log into Doomworld at the time because the email attached to the account was like long dead.
hmm
And so I had to get somebody to DM one of the Doomworld mods to like reset my password. And they did, and they were very helpful. And I finally could log in again. And that's when I like discovered all these like DMs from 5 years ago.
that would have been
I don't know.
interesting to see.
It was fun. Yeah, yeah. There was. I think the one that stood out to me was Doom Radio wanting to interview me, and I was like, oh man, that sounds nerve wracking. I don't want to. I don't want to go on a radio. That's just,
Well, I got in there first in
you
radio, so
did, you
what now?
did. Yeah, yeah. It's
10
happening.
years later or whatever, when
Yeah,
they
yeah,
probably DM'd you.
yeah. Um, and yeah, I got that all sorted, and then I remember eventually just deciding, oh bugger it, I'll just post a screenshot. That's all I'll do. I won't make any other comments.
We
I think I've
definitely talked about. I was like, because I'm pretty sure I
yeah.
suggested it. I was like, you should just post a screenshot with
Oh,
no comment
yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah, and yeah, you might have said that, yeah, and I
Yeah,
remember I must have thought that was a great idea because that's exactly what I ended up doing,
yeah.
and um, like I was like so like well, I had at the time. I think I had a bit of coffee as well because I was just sort of like on this big mapping binge, and I remember leaving my computer on and like overnight, and like I heard like the doom world notification sound, like the dunk noise, and
Mhm.
I got up middle of the night. I could just hear it going from like the other room. Like, it was still going. I'm like, oh man, it's going crazy in there. And yeah, I got up, and I think for like a brief period, it was the most like liked post on Doomworld.
Well, the hilarious fucking thing is that Hoyfam came back at the exact same
Yes,
time
yes,
as you.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I do wonder if it was because he saw that. Like, maybe he'd been like mulling and thinking about it as
Yeah,
well,
maybe. I mean,
and
that would
maybe
make
that.
more sense than it being a coincidence.
I mean, if it was a coincidence, that's it's really fucking funny. But because the thing I was like, oh my god, damn, he was like one of my big inspirations for mapping, and you know, I do hope that he gets his stuff done. I do hope that he's able
Well,
to.
yeah, I mean, he came back and he said he was gonna do like a bunch of E1 stuff, and then he
Yeah, yeah.
he disappeared
He
again. So I'm not sure what
again,
happened.
yeah, he lost. Yeah, maybe he lost his um motivation. Maybe. I
Yeah,
do hope he
sometimes you
finds
get
it
real
again.
fired up to do something, and you think
Yeah,
you're gonna do it, and then
yeah.
nothing
And I was
materializes.
like, I managed to keep like my motivation for the next few maps up for a while, actually. Yeah, I mapped straight for like, oh, it would have been, oh, hang on, when did I? Because I think I got the maps out in, oh, was it 2019 or 2020?
I couldn't tell you. Every year is
It
a
was,
blur.
well, I remember I got back into the editor like
It must have been
late,
2019.
Right,
Yeah,
so it would have been late 2018 that I was chatting with Mused and Co.
I think that sounds correct, but
Yeah, so I think it was like I think it was something where like October, November, around then. And yeah, and then I sort of mapped like a demon for like those next like 6 months or well, however many months it was, and was like, yeah, I'm gonna make yeah, I set it on 4 maps for some reason. Um and yeah, it all came out pretty good actually. And
Mhm.
yeah, like map 15 was the only sort of map I think out of the four that I was like thinking, yeah, I really needed to sort of be a bit more sort of careful with some stuff, but I think the rest came out pretty good.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I don't know. I actually really like 15. I think it's good.
oh yeah, I think it came out pretty good. I like it. I mean, there's one fight I do want to change though, unless the fight. There's this really grindy fight in like a water flat just before like the big stairs, and there's there's just so like you've only got like a megasphere, maybe two, for the whole fight,
Mhm.
and it just goes on and on and on, and like if you just like a few unlucky splashes and you've just got to start over the fight again. And Zul actually had a suggestion where maybe, yeah, like I'd involve lowers right just towards the end, for like just the cleanup, just to
Yeah.
cut down on that last little sort of bit.
Mhm.
And I thought that was a really good idea. So if yeah, you might see like an invol pop up
Well,
in that
I'm an
fight later
invuln
on.
hater, so sad to say.
I know, but I felt it's either put an invol in or change the fight drastically.
I
And
mean,
I think that
cleanup is always it's always a bit of a problem in large scale stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah, and particularly when you've got like a billion vials, like in
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
big packs, they can be absolute nuisances if things don't go your way, and the fights just can get really, really dragged on because you just can't get to those vials safely, and you've just got to keep peeking over and over and over until finally like you've got a safe shot against that one vial, and then you pop out to get him, and another one just zaps you out of nowhere,
Mhm.
and it can be quite frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, I guess now we're into 15 and some of the newer
Mm,
ones.
mm, mm.
And the newest Sunder maps are obviously like vastly more complex than the originals. They
Yeah,
have like
yeah.
they also use like a lot of new textures. They use Mac on stuff more recently and then an O text for a
Mm,
lot of them.
mm.
With how different the newer maps are from the original 14, had you ever considered like making this a new project or like splitting the two into like Sunder 1 and 2 or anything like that?
Um, no, not really. I mean, for me, because Sunder was always like exploring new map themes, I've always felt that I could just always just jump back into it and just add a new map to it. Um,
Hmm.
like the whole, like a big part of the point of the project was just to have it open in that regard. Um, and yeah, that has been like a good decision, I think, because exploring new texture teams is yeah quite motivating. So
Yeah. Well,
um,
it's interesting because like me and Rubik's play a lot of like we'll find like old megawatts and stuff because he just
mm,
has like he has a folder that he's constantly adding to of just stuff to play in Xandru. And
oh,
a lot of the time when you play these people's like first megawatts or whatever,
yeah,
you'll see them become like a better mapper as the
yeah,
megawatt goes
yeah,
on.
yeah,
And with you with Sunder, it's kind of hilarious because obviously it's on this like it's on like another scale entirely to like a regular person because the maps are already like very like pretty high quality obviously in the early stages of Sunder, but they get bigger and more complex and you
mm,
see the development sort of going
yeah.
as you
That
continue. Is that like is it fun for you to be able to like have that all as one continuous strand that you can sort of look
yeah,
through?
I that's part of the reason. Um, at least with some of the maps, I don't want to go back and edit them too much because it is sort of like yeah, my sort of mapping sort of legacy to some degree, like how I've progressed, and changed and refined what I do. And it's interesting that yeah, there's like a few basic things that I do that haven't changed much. Like yeah, like cube stacking sort of shapes and just drawing random rooms and filling them in
Hmm.
has been such like a useful technique for me because it's just such like a free and easy sort of way to map that doesn't require you to sit down and plan out these like complicated encounters and come up with like really, you know, complicated gimmicks and things like that. You can just let the shape of the room dictate a fight for you
Hmm.
um and iterate from there. Um Now this does work in some cases better than others, but particularly if the room ends up just being a square, like you don't there's there's not a lot you can do with a square
It's
room,
a good shape.
except
It's a great shape.
it's a great shape. But unfortunately, the only fight that you can do is some iteration of monster spawn on the corners. Like
Yeah,
that
I think.
there's not a lot else you can do that's hugely interesting without breaking the room up in some way.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I would always advocate for some mix of techniques when it comes to
Yeah,
design. Like
yeah.
plan some aspects, think about monsters as you're building, and
Mm,
sometimes build a room and then let the monsters come after, and
yeah,
you gotta weave all this stuff together a lot of the time, and I think it
yeah.
happens more gradually as you get into a better flow
Yeah,
of
yeah,
mapping.
and, like, I didn't it was funny, like, one of the other big sort of things for me when I came back that blew my mind was playing Rubik's early stuff, like, yes, the Stardates. Like,
Yeah,
Stardate
because he
2086.
came right after and
Yeah.
was like super heavily inspired by you, obviously, him and Danny.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
yeah,
missed
yeah.
it sort of just, and then you come
I
back, and
know,
there's
I
all
know,
this stuff. Yeah.
oh, yeah, and I was just overwhelmed by all of that, and there was just this moment where I'm, like, playing through Stardate 2086, I think, and, um, like, Rubik's had obviously seen the stuff I did and probably a few other people, and yeah, he asked the question, "Hey, well, why don't we can make more interesting fights than this? We don't just have to just spam monsters in these closets. You know, there's plenty of other cool things you can do with monster placement and doing." And, yeah, Rubik's is obviously very, very clever in that regard. And I just remember thinking, "Oh man, I missed out on this whole thing. Like this whole progression with like complex fight design." And because that was the thing when I came back and made some of the new Sunder maps, like I was still in that old mindset, like,
Hmm.
you know, build the room, shape it up, and just let the fight idea come from the room, rather than like planning out some sort of complex gimmick or like, um, yeah, just thinking the fight through, like beforehand to a large degree. Like I was always iterating instead most of the time. It was always, dump a whole bunch of monsters in, see how the room worked, and then let that generate the ideas
Hmm.
on, yeah, where everything should go. And yeah, like you'll see like a bit of a change in some of the fight designs and some of the very recent sort of Sunder maps in that regard. Like definitely stuff that's been planned out a bit
Yeah, for
more.
sure. There's definitely more. I don't know what you would call it, like focused gameplay, or like there's certainly some more gimmicky fights in like
Yeah,
Sunder 20, and
20 in particular was
20 is the one
where,
I think of, and 31, I
yeah,
think.
yeah. Well, it's funny. With 31 was definitely built just with the whole, yeah, build random shapes, fill it in kind of deal, which is something I do a lot of.
I think you just played Sunlust though. I think,
I had,
if I remember
and
correctly, because I was
I was
talking to you at the time about it.
no, I had gone through some last, I was still sort of processing a lot of what I'd played and still like thinking about it and thinking of ways to sort of use some of the ideas from there in my WOD.
Hmm.
And it wouldn't be for a while because I also had like a lot of those other ideas also are reliant on a lot of advanced mapping techniques like, yeah, voodoo closets
Yeah.
and other little tricks like that. And I was still also becoming sort of more and more comfortable using more of the advanced sort of functions. And it wasn't until I hit like, particularly I think map 20, actually, I think the most recently released one, that was where I felt comfortable with the voodoo closet and just went bananas, did all
Yeah.
sorts of crazy stuff.
With
And
so with 31, like that
mm,
map's obviously it's a lot more scaled back in size. It's a
yeah,
lot more
yeah.
tighter fights. Do you think is that just because it's in a 31 slot, or can we kind of expect a couple of tighter, more grindery, more map 31 kind of maps to break up some of these like huge giants that you're making at the moment?
Well, the thing is, like, with a lot of these maps, I don't necessarily plan them to be that big a lot of the time.
They just get carried away.
Yeah, yeah, basically, it's really is an organic thing. It was the same with 31. It was just a very organic sort of um map. Like I just drew the outer big cube because that was the concept, was this big great green cube in the valley that the player would like walk up into like this little hole in the side of the cube and go inside, and I had no idea what was going to be inside the cube other than more green textures, but uh yeah, it just became a lot more compact just because of how big I originally drew it. I thought, oh yeah, this will be big enough, and I mean, I think I was also slightly inspired by. Oh, did I? I wasn't sure I played this Wall of Sunlight at that point, but I do recall it being a Sunlight map. That was sort of on my mind around that time, but I can't remember if that was like a direct influence or if it was just something I noticed after the fact. Oh,
Mm.
anyway, but yeah, the House of Corrosion was just, um, yeah, no, it just sort of was just, it was small just because of the initial size I was working with, and like there was originally going to be like one big final section like after the cubes outside, because it was originally going to be like that sort of final sort of area where you got the steps and up to the left to go outside the map. That was originally going to be this big hole in the wall, and I actually started building that and realized I didn't like how it looked, and I didn't. I also realized like how low down the room actually was relative to the outside, and I was like, oh, you're not nearly high enough for like a nice vista shot. So eventually I sort of changed it. So I deleted the windows and had it so yeah, you got that lift and you go out to those little floating cubes.
I remember,
And just
I think I spent about 2 hours trying to help you make those floating cubes. Like, I think we were trying to get them to be solid all the way to see if there was a way in Boom to do it, and there just isn't.
yeah, and it might have been you. I can't remember who it was, but somebody like showed me that trick where you just use like a solid color
Yeah,
on like the middle
maybe
texture.
Ben.
Yeah.
It might have been Benjo, actually.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Well, somebody in the event Discord helped me with that,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh no, this looks really cool. We've got like some pretty cool floating cubes. Like that was good enough. And
Yeah.
like once I finally understood how the fake floors worked, yeah, that all came out quite well, and I'm pretty happy with that little sort of section.
Yeah, I think
Um,
31 is maybe my favorite Sunder map these days.
okay. How about
Ooh,
that?
I mean, it's obviously in line with my kind of combat a little bit, but
Yeah, yeah,
but I do definitely
yeah,
enjoy that one.
yeah. I remember I remember Aurelius didn't like 31. He got up to the door section where all the doors open up, and
Mm.
he he he
Hmm.
he he was bored after I think like the third or fourth door, and there's like 10 to go.
Wow.
And I mean, again, you see Aurelius's work, and he's definitely all about having as many unique encounters as possible,
Hmm.
and he definitely doesn't like the grind at all. It's
Grind
not
is
his
good.
thing.
Embrace the grind. Sigma male mindset, the grind.
Oh, bloody hell. Oh my god. Um,
uh,
I mean, it's funny. Like, I don't see myself doing like intentionally too much grindy stuff. In the future. Um,
well, what's this
but
holy hell thing then?
oh god, right. So, but are you aware of a map that Dubs and Elmi were working on?
Yes.
Yes. So it's basically their tribute to Holy Hell, and they started working on it many, many years ago, and I saw someone streaming it. Oh, someone was testing it. I can't remember who it was. Oh, it was No Reason. No Reason was testing it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And I remember seeing it and going, man, this isn't the best looking map, Dubs. Um and he laughed and said, yeah, yeah, yeah. It wasn't supposed to look that great.
He laughed in
And
text. Let's be clear.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This would have been like in emotes or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
He keck flopped. That's probably
yeah,
what he
he,
did.
he definitely would have, yeah, something like that. And and I just remember like saying, "Oh yeah, I can probably detail this for you. That probably wouldn't take me too long." Now, as you can probably tell from my tone, that was like not a very reasonable assessment because the map is as long and as grindy as the original Holy Hell map, and oh man, it's enormous. And I have started detailing it. I think I'm like 75%, 80% of the way there, and it has it has been a nightmare. I've got to say, like, because it turns out like my detailing style isn't very useful in some cases. Like detailing other people's layouts, or at least in this particular instance, has been quite frustrating, and it's also partly because um, Dubs and Elmy were, they were quite chill about the approach to detailing and texturing in the map. Like, I mean, for example, they didn't have a waterfall texture in the WAD
So they
and
used
couldn't be
comp
bothered.
blue.
No, no, they used Fire Blue.
Oh yeah, that's the other
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah. They even used Fire Blue for some lifts in one section for no reason that I could discern. Um, It has got some of the jankiest monster courses I have ever seen. They have
This all
works of
sounds
art.
like a run of the mill dubs map. I'll be
It
honest.
really does. I mean, it it's been an experience, I gotta say.
And now that you say
And
this, I think I've seen a couple of screenshots maybe that you posted. I
I
think.
may, I have shared a couple.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I shared them on Doomworld though. I think they were like on a Discord somewhere. I just
Top
sort of,
secret project.
yeah, definitely top secret. I'm hoping to get the energy to go back and just like burn through the last few rooms to finish that up. Um, But at this rate, I'll probably get a Sunder map done before that. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, you are sort of quite, I don't know, generous, I guess, in terms of like you're willing to help people out all the time with things. You've made like a huge
mm,
amount of my title screens for you made one for
yeah,
Entropy, for Actual Worlds. You
yeah, yeah. No, that's another thing. I studied sort of like Photoshoppy stuff way back in the early 2000s, and um, yeah, it wasn't hugely useful professionally, although I've done a bit of work like that. But it did end up being like useful in the long run for like making textures and title maps and stuff because
Mhm.
like um yeah, it was just very useful for that kind of thing. And I was like, I wanted to get better at like making those sorts of things as well. And I figured sort of helping people out a bit here and there would be good practice. And yeah, I've made quite a few title picks.
Well, how's it
Um,
been sort of coming back into the community and not only like obviously you've talked about like finding out that your maps were very influential, but what's it
mm.
been? You said you sort of didn't like, uh, or you were a bit at odds with the way the community responded back in the day to the types of things you were making, and then you came back and like found that I suppose it was like quite a bit more inclusive for you. What's it been like coming back and like becoming part of the community in like a much bigger way now?
Um, like, I mean, I don't recall people. Particularly back in the day, I felt like the maps were fairly well received. Like, I don't recall people hating them or anything like that. But um, I think the big difference for me has been like the ability to watch people play maps,
Mm-hmm.
like and just and Discord as well was like a communication tool.
Yeah.
It's a lot more sort of personal. Like and I think part of the reason I think that might have been also part of the reason I left was because I didn't really like get involved with the community. Like I didn't make like too many sort of like friends, so to speak, on Doomworld.
Yeah.
Like I remember talking to Kaika a lot. He was one person I remember talking to a fair bit. And who was the other guy who got himself banned? Who did all the really arty looking maps? The Muse found his stuff really interesting. Oh, I've forgotten his name now. He was like another sort of he posted in the old Sunder thread quite a lot. I've forgotten his name.
I don't know off the top
Anyway,
of my head.
you'd notice stuff if you saw it.
Hmm.
Anyway, yeah, it's definitely a very different experience coming back, like with the community. Like it's changed a lot. Um, Mostly for the better, I feel. Like I feel like Discord and other sort of stuff has really like helped. Like yeah, like people like talk about Doom in a really sort of helpful way, and like the forums are pretty useful. But because there's also been this like big push, like Sum Us was obviously a an amazing sort of piece of work, and it obviously influenced a lot of people. And um, there's been like a lot of other big great projects. Yeah, like I think Abandoned came out really well.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
I felt like as far as people trying to like imitate my style, it was a really good one. I thought like the Muse stuff in particular, I felt was like really sort of close to some of the stuff I'd want to make. Although he actually hyper details even more than me in some cases.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
It must have been weird coming back to to Abandon, which I mean, what was funny about it was that they were trying to adhere to like these vanilla guidelines
yeah,
and things because they were
yeah,
like, well,
yeah,
Gazebo was clearly like a purist and he didn't want to use any booze mechanics and like voodoo
yeah.
doll or
Well,
anything like that.
it's funny you asked. The actual main reason I didn't use any of it was because I was like I was not good at experimenting. I wasn't a very brave mapper. Like I didn't want to like try all these extra crazy features and stuff, and I had no idea what boom and all that was. And um, it I was like, no, I'm just gonna stick to these vanilla things. That's all I need. It's simple enough. And I'd see things like voodoo closets and stuff and be like, no, that sounds too hard. And in hindsight, that's ridiculous. But that's sort of where I was with my mapping confidence, I guess, so to speak. I was not very confident um, in being able to like get my head around all that stuff. So I kept it as simple as possible. And
Mhm. Not so much now. I was actually gonna
no,
say, I guess more recently, like now that you've been working on Sunder and gotten
mm,
involved with some other people in the community like Bridge Burner and stuff, you've
yeah. In
moved
fact,
into working with like
yeah,
UDMF now, and I was
yeah,
wondering
and
what your experience has been kind of learning those new tools.
oh man. So yeah, I'd like to make a correction. Actually, earlier you mentioned I was working on elementalism. I I actually haven't worked on elementalism except for the title screen.
Oh, I thought you
That
had a map for that. What
no,
am I confusing that with? There's another
prob
project.
you're probably thinking of Age of Hell. Probably because
Okay.
that's the only UDMF project I'm currently involved in.
Okay, I think I saw
Um,
your Age of Hell map, and I must have thought it was for elementalism. I think that was what I
Probably,
got
yeah.
confused with there.
I've got two maps in the works right now.
Mm-hmm.
One's like this great sort of like mosque, like temple sort of palace thing that crushes CPUs and GPUs in equal
Mm-hmm.
measure. And um, yeah, like it won't work until I split it up like properly. Like it's just too big. It's like 146,000 lines or something. And it's not even finished. That's the thing. Like there's still like detailing left undone. It like there was originally going to be a panning shot of the exterior for the Age of Hell trailer, and it never made it in because like even on Bridges' machine, he couldn't get a smooth recording of the exterior camera pad.
Oh no. I wonder if we could
um,
run at a really low FPS and then speed it up or something.
yeah, you might be able to do that. I don't know. But um, you know, UDMF has been like a like an even bigger learning experience, and learning Boom has been in some ways like um, there's just so much you can do with it. And I am very keen to go back to that sort of work, and I definitely will, probably either late this year or sometime next year, because I think Bridge wants to hopefully like he's hoping to get episode 1 of Age of Hell out this year, and it's looking possible. Um, Believe it or not. Well,
I feel
this
like whenever I hear Bridge talk about it, he's always like a little like I don't want to say down in the dumps, but he's like, oh, like this project will come out in 2050 or whatever.
Yeah, well, he's definitely had to push the dates back a few times because it's just an immense project, and it was the same with low elementalism, from what I understood as well. That got pushed back numerous times. And I don't know if you've played any of it, but it's really clear as to why when you actually sit down and play them. Um,
It definitely looks ambitious in terms of like uh, the features that are involved, the sort of UDMF
yeah,
features. Yeah.
it's not just the yeah, it's a combination of features and just like the level of mapping involved, like trying to sort of like keep up with Bridge kind of thing with his incredibly intricate architecture. And in fact, that was another thing I remember coming back and seeing like screenshots from some of Bridge's early work
Mm-hmm.
and just being absolutely blown away, like thinking like I'd had images of similar ideas in my head years ago, and I'd given up thinking that's not possible. You can't build that in Doom. And Bridge, well, yeah, he's done a lot of experimentation when it comes to building different types of architecture, and
Mm-hmm.
he said, oh no, you can do all this, and yeah, he was very sort of helpful when it came to like understanding how some of the tools work that I hadn't really considered, and particularly the way the stair builder works, and
Oh baby,
um,
what a tool!
oh man, um,
I
and
could, I reckon, I could build a whole map in Stair Builder now.
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't even need to
yeah,
draw any lines.
no, the stair builder is an absolute magic tool.
New
The only thing,
community project idea.
yeah,
Stair Builder
only
tool only.
stair builder. Oh, yeah, you're only allowed to draw this many lines. The rest is all going to be from the stair builder.
Yeah.
One thing it can't do though, I don't know if you've seen some of my UDMF stuff, but there's like domes in it. Like I've built like, um,
Yeah, I think I remember talking to you about this because the
yeah,
circles aren't actually perfect that it comes up with in
yeah,
terms of alignment to the grid, right?
correct, because
Yeah.
it's projecting along. Oh, it's not. Yeah, it's not lining up with the grid. It's lining up with like,
The
uh,
angle of whatever it's drawing
yeah,
from, basically.
yeah. So it's not. You can't like if you want a bunch of concentric circles that are evenly spaced, you can't use the stair builder. It won't work, and you need to do that to do like stuff like domes. Like if you want to do like an arched, um, like an arched shape, you need to make sure all of the certain lines are evenly spaced. Otherwise, it will you'll start getting all sorts of little shitty sort of uh it's hard to explain, but little sort of holes in the slope. Like if you load up
It'll
uh
basically like start like creating angles instead of
yeah,
sloping it. It will like bring it to a point instead of
yeah, yeah,
allowing it to slope smoothly.
yeah. Like if you load up Lullaby by Danlex, gorgeous map. You will see some domes at the start of the map, and if you're like me, you'll fly up to them with no clip too. Have a really close look and discover he ran into that problem, but just masked it. Um, but then
Wow,
figured out the
calling
problem
out
like,
a
oh,
lullaby
but
live.
but he figured that out later on in the map and did it correctly within that awesome room with the like the floors like sinking into itself like
Ah,
something
yeah,
from
yeah.
Alice in Wonderland or
Very
something.
cool looking.
Yeah. Um, I've forgotten what the original question was.
I think it was just general discussion about like you getting into UDMF and stuff. Really.
Yeah, I mean, FUDMF like has been it's allowed me to explore these architectural ideas I've had in my head for years that I haven't like you just can't explore in Boom.
Mm-hmm. Do you think once you
Stuff.
finish
Yeah.
Sunder, you're like done with Boom? Do you think you'll move into UDMF
Mm,
strictly, or do you think you'll always want to make
I
things in those
think
restrictions?
no, I think like what will probably happen once Sunder's done. I think all my big stuff will probably be UDMF, but there'll be like basically like the community projects I'll help out on will probably be Boom, and of course, like I imagine MBF 21 is going to become pretty common
Oh yeah,
in like next like 12 months or so. I've only played with it a tiny bit
it's
for
great. It's really good. I don't think
yeah.
well, I don't want to call it too early, but I don't think I'll go back to Boom.
Oh no, I think I suspect some of the final Sunder maps will probably be in MBF 21, to be honest. Like now that like all the ports you'd expect to play Sunder in support MBF, I may as well just start using some of those features later on.
in Sunder.
Yeah.
But then, are you just gonna have people have to change compatibility halfway through the WOD, or are you gonna
That's a good
are
point,
you gonna make
actually.
the whole WOD MBF 21 only?
Well, I mean, it does jump from vanilla to boom.
Well, I
Mm,
wouldn't have run in vanilla. I don't know what to tell you.
that's true. That's true. I guess only vanilla
I
actions.
think
Yeah. I
even
mean,
map one would have crashed in vanilla.
yeah. No, you probably no. It definitely would have actually. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know. If you load it up, in like DSDA, you like if you jump from like a boom map to an MBF map, it should be okay, surely. But I guess yeah. There is that comp level issue when it comes to recording.
It depends what
Um,
you use as well. I mean, certain
yeah.
features only work in MBF 21, obviously. So if you're
Yeah.
using those features, you need the compat mode.
Mm. I'll have to think about that then,
Mm-hmm.
because I got to say that particularly the ability to block ground monsters only um is something like I've desperately wanted for years.
I think me and Mega might have been the impetus for that because it might have been parity with a UDMF feature that we
mm,
tried to get implemented a long time ago.
yeah, it's funny. I think you basically beat UDMF to a degree, like because it's just like a simple tag in MBF. I don't know if it is in UDMF currently. I think it's a bit different in UDMF. It's not quite so simple, if I recall. I can't remember. It's been a while since
I'm
I've.
not sure. I would have assumed they would have just added a tick box, but I haven't tinkered with UDMF in a little while. So.
Yeah, same. I haven't touched my UDMF work in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, part of the reason I was looking at MBF was also because I did have some ideas of some of the very final sort of stuff in Sunder that would be very difficult to do in Boom. And like, I mean, stuff like the Hive Mother, for example, I wanted like particularly like the spread attack that she does. It would have been really nice to be able to not just have to rely on say like the Mancubus fireballs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and MBF definitely gives you more flexibility, from my understanding.
Well, you can also
Um,
use Decker hack instead of dehacked, which is
yeah, I've heard that
it is a
mentioned, but I
lot
don't know much about
nicer.
it.
Well,
Right.
it basically you write stuff out in Decorate and it will convert it into dehacked for you. And
Oh,
Decorate, I don't know if you've worked with Decorate, but
no.
it's like about as plain text as you can get in terms of like a
Yes.
programming language.
Oh, it is. Like I've looked at some Decora, but I've never actually
Yeah,
done
it's
any.
like it's very simple to work with even for someone who's not who doesn't have
Mm,
like a programming background.
mm,
So it's much nicer than
mm.
dehacked.
Okay. But yeah, no, it's been good to come back in a lot of ways, and I did definitely overdo it with some of my mapping. In terms of just time spent, like just on my computer mapping. There was definitely a bit of burnout, particularly around Sunder 19. I think was the one where I distinctly remember just being a little bit of a wreck, to be honest. I was just completely exhausted mentally at that point, and um,
Well, I think part of the reason you agreed to help with Fracture Wars 32 was I think you were a bit burnt out on Sunder at the time, maybe.
oh yeah, that could have definitely been it. And no, it was nice to take a bit of a break and make work on that map. And um, yeah, I was really happy with how that came out. And I was also glad that you actually took as long as you did because it let me sort of revisit a lot of it and come back and
I
pick
like
stuff
that
up. And
backhanded compliment. Like,
no, no,
I'm glad that you're such a slow mapper because
I mean, you didn't see that slow to me. I mean, I
I
feel,
map in bursts. I'm
yeah,
relatively slow in terms of like finishing things, but I build a
yeah,
lot in a small amount of time.
yeah. And I reckon, like, if we were sort of like mapping side by side, I reckon, yeah, it'd probably be fairly comparable. I think, like, I don't think one of us will be obviously faster than the other, but Yeah, I did find, 19. I just sort of, oof, yeah. I sort of like, I, I was like, all right, I'm taking a break from this for a while.
Well, yeah, I
Um,
mean, it's really. I mean, I've built some pretty big maps that are reasonably detailed, but I feel like my detailing is very different. Like Entropy and Breathless are both like towards 100k sides. They're like
yeah,
maybe almost 60k lines or something. So they're big
yeah,
detailed maps, but
mm.
I feel like the way that I detail is so different. Yours is very like I'm not sure how to describe it, but lots of motifs sort of utilized
Mm,
throughout your maps, and it's more
yeah,
structured, like a lot of heavy
yeah.
line detailing in set areas, and sort of no sort of area left untouched in terms of detail.
Yeah, it's like the two things for me, it's like consistent theme and like as much as I can a consistent level of detail as well. Like if I like
Yeah,
I'll like detail a whole section and then there'll be this bit over there that I've left and I'll be like, doesn't look right. It
I'm
this it
exactly the
just
same.
it looks under detailed now. I've got to fill that in with some stair builder nonsense or something.
Well, Fractured World started off as like, oh, this will be like Scythe, Plutonia maps, and they were going to be like pretty quick and simple maps. And then I started, and map one kind of was that. Like, it sort of ended
Yeah,
up how I
yeah,
wanted it to
yeah.
be. And then I started building map two, and then I'm like, oh, I want to detail this in this way. This would look cool if it was like this. And then I was like, well, if I
Hmm.
do this amount of detail here, then the rest of the ward has to adhere to that. And
Yeah,
then
exactly,
that's
exactly.
sort of where it all
And
went downhill.
yeah, and it's funny like that there was 19 was the map as well. It was also like, I mean, 19 was like also one of the very, very first times I'd ever tried to use Voodoos properly. And I made a few mistakes with them that are fixable, but like, yeah, I just put off fixing them for a long time because I wasn't looking forward to it. uh, because I didn't understand the consistencies between scrolling speeds between ports and like particularly between some of them, there's some major differences. Like Boom and like well PR Boom at the time because it wasn't out, but PR Boom and GZ Doom are pretty similar. But bloody yeah, Eternity and there was another port someone else was using. They were just completely different.
Mhm.
Like there was just wild scrolling differences between Eternity and GZ Doom and PR Boom.
Yeah, I've had a
Um,
lot of problems with scrollers between ports.
yeah, yeah, it's and then eventually someone mentioned, yeah, just use 32 line segments for your scroll lengths, and it will
Mhm.
be pretty consistent between ports, and that has seemed to be good. Uh,
Mhm.
like overall for me, like I've that's all I've used so far, and I haven't heard any complaints since. So
Well, there you go. Word to the wise.
yeah,
So you're currently working on 21 of Sunder, I
yep,
believe.
I had it open today, believe it or not,
Oh shit.
because I just finished 2 maps for Automx, which was yeah, I don't know if you know much about that, but it's basically like a horde mode for Odamx.
Yep. I was in.
Um,
I talked to you a little bit when you were making one of the maps.
oh yeah, yeah. So I've made 2 maps of that. They're both probably a bit too big, which is
That's
pretty on.
surprising.
It's on brand for me, yeah. Yeah. But they might be fun in multiplayer. I've only tested them in single.
Hmm.
They did do a multiplayer test recently, and mine was the only map that completely broke because I changed mapping formats right at the start, and it re-tagged all my monster spawners, so they didn't appear in multiplayer.
Ah,
And
perfect.
I didn't notice.
Bit of
And
finding. Got to use that find mode.
yeah, yeah, well, it was like a 5 second fix, but it was just not something I noticed in single player. It all seemed to be working, and it was only when they did the multiplayer test last weekend that um I was told that yeah, sorry, Gazebo, we didn't test your map because it didn't work. Um,
Well,
yeah,
no problem. So when
yeah,
can we expect map 21 of Sunder? Do you think? Like how far along is that?
I okay. The the layout is basically finished currently,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of not the fights, there's only like a few fights that are done. but in terms of being able to like walk across the map from one end to the other, like there's a whole bunch of like completely undetailed rooms which are looking a little bit too big, which again, shocker.
Mm-hmm.
But today I basically was just sorting out this layout problem that I'd run into where I wanted the map to loop back in on itself, and I realized that I'd sort of mapped into it myself in a bit of a corner with some of the stuff. Because yeah, again, I don't always plan out a lot of the stuff a huge amount.
Mm-hmm.
Map 19 was the one exception. Actually, map 19 was like heavily planned.
Sunder
Um,
happens to you. You don't happen to Sunder.
yeah, it's all very organic in that regard. Yeah, it's like the two different modes of storytelling. Um, if you've ever read On Writing by Stephen King, he mentions there's two major ways that you'd write a book or a
The
story.
gardener and the architect, is it this one?
Something like that. Yeah, basically, there's the whole make it up as you go along, refine it, and then there's the whole plan it out from the word go. And you do a bit of both kind of thing. You sort of get a bit from one sort of approach and you get one from the other, and you don't necessarily adhere to one entirely, but I'm definitely more of a make it up as you go along kind of mapper.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's working for you.
Yeah, it does, and it's kind of relaxing, honestly. Like just lay those lines down and to see this, map form in front of you, even if you don't necessarily know it is what the final result's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, I mean, I usually have like a theme in mind. I've usually got like I've got a visual goal of, but in terms of the layout, yeah, I rarely plan that out too far. Although that has changed a bit in recent maps. Like I am planning out my fights uh, a fair bit heavier because particularly when you do scripted fights, you need to be
Oh
a lot
yeah.
more careful with them. It's not just 100 cacodemons and 20 revenants teleporting into like a room. It's yeah, there's more going on than that. Like the fact that there's that fight in the center of map 20 with all the pillars that you can raise and lower. Um, like you can basically configure the room into like three different shapes roughly. I remember you testing that,
Yep. Me and
and
Scotty had very different experiences, I think.
yes, it involved there was a bit of nerfing for that as a result of one of the tests. Um,
I think it was. I think it was when I played it because I got
I
into.
think it might have been Um, it got so I think it got nerfed twice actually. There was like Nev played it first,
I think it was
and
No
I'm like,
Reason played it before me, and then
yeah, yeah,
something like that.
and and I just remember like nerfing it, at least twice because there was some very good players having a lot of trouble with it, and um, a lot more trouble than I had with it anyway. And I'm thinking, all right, okay. But yeah, the thing about that whole fight was that minus balancing issues towards the end of getting the map out there, all the complex voodoo closets and all the like control sectors, like all of that worked the first time. I was just stunned when I loaded it up and like tested it and nothing broke. Um, like everything worked how I intended. I think it was just it was crazy. Like I mean, I did it iteratively, like I did it like one bit by bit sort of thing. I didn't sort of um like build each section all at the same time, but I was just shocked that it had got to that point, and that sort of also made me more confident to try some really crazy stuff like the teleport monster group fight later in that map, which that was the
Oh
real
yeah.
headache, was that fight to me.
Yeah, I remember the messaging a
And
little bit about that one.
yeah, and it turned out the main problem in the end was just a mistagged like voodoo doll trigger. It was just one trigger as well.
Classic. Always
Yep.
something really dumb.
Yeah. It was something so simple, and it became overcomplicated because somebody else on the Doomlord forums was trying to help me out. He's like, "Oh, I think I found the problem. I reckon it's probably this and this." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, actually, that makes sense. That's the kind of mistake I can see myself making." And it wasn't that. It turned out it was just way more simple because,
Yeah.
like, he had misunderstood the logic of the voodoo closets. And to be fair to him, they were really confusing. And eventually I discovered that because the way I had to make the fight, it involved a lot of copying and pasting of the closets. which meant duplicate tag numbers, and one of the duplicate tag numbers hadn't been swapped over, and that's it all
That's a
works now.
story of
So
the
yeah,
kind of mistakes you make when you
yeah, and
are
it all
building gigantic maps.
yeah, and the reason we missed it during testing was because nobody selected numbers 1 and 2 in that order during testing. Nobody,
That's
and
the
I just never.
classic testing process, really.
Yeah. Um, like somehow I never tested doing that particular order. You didn't, Arizen did it, everyone else didn't. All the other people who tested it just didn't do that very basic sort of sequence. Which,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, you can never
kind of
predict
surprising.
with testing. I guess you do
No,
have to kind of have a bit of a structure to it, but you can never tell.
yeah. I mean, I think with me at the moment, the I usually get someone like one of the best players to test it first, kind of thing,
Hmm.
because that usually gives me an idea of like if he like someone like Nev is struggling on a fight, always having a little bit of trouble, that's like an instant nerf from me now. Like if he's having trouble, then it's there's something wrong.
Yeah, I think that's generally a good. I think Ank Caligon is usually my
Oh,
well,
Calico, that's
Nev and Ank generally
oh
test
man, I
first
haven't
stuff.
chatted to Ank in ages. Oh man,
But yeah,
is
it's
it? I
usually a
think.
good gauge for
Oh
well,
yeah,
I made this way too hard.
yeah. In fact, oh man, I wonder if Caligon was he one of my old testers? He might have been.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I'll ask him, I guess.
I mean, it'd be in the readme.
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't even know. 21 coming soon, I guess. Was that
mm, I'd say no. I don't
okay?
get your hopes up. Like I don't know what my mapping like speed's going to be like in the coming weeks. Like I want to get 21. Like I'd love to get at least 2 Sunder maps done this year, at least.
Mhm.
That'd be lovely. But yeah, my current goal is get Sunder 21 done, get the Holy Hell tribute done, and just we'll get started on 22 as well.
Mhm. I
Uh,
did just before I get to like the final question.
yeah.
I did want to ask you what it's been like working with Age of Hell and not just the UDMF features, but
Oh
like a whole
right.
different sandbox and stuff from Doom. Just quickly.
I yeah, I've honestly loved it. Like it's been like visually speaking, I've been able to like just push things that you just not only cannot do in Boom, but I've been there when we've like just discovered things in UDMF that you couldn't do before because like particularly 2019, 2020 was like actually and also 2021 was like those years were like really big for UDMF tools. Like Boris was adding some stuff like to UDMF that made certain structure designs sort of practical to make suddenly. Like for example, being able to like easily slope 3D floors, for example.
Hmm.
Like, you couldn't do that easily before. It was an
That was
absolute pain in the
terrible. Yeah.
neck. You had to have a convoluted system to do that easily. And then the ability to do like arches as well. Like the arch tool was the other big thing. And from that, I made the mandala room, which I think I've posted screenshots of that around. And I don't think anybody had made anything quite like that before. And I remember just being shocked that this particular thing worked. So because normally when you want to make an arch between a bunch of sectors, they have to be a particular shape. And I suddenly discovered that you could cut the slope surfaces up, and you could copy and paste them together, and they'd retain all the slope information.
Okay. That
So
would
I was
make it a bit
expecting that
easier. Yeah.
because I was expecting that stuff to break. So I did this thing that we're calling like arch splicing, where you can create arch shapes and then cut them up into different shapes, and then yeah, paste those together to create different things. And that allows you to create like arches that meet together in like a radial sort of room. Um, Bridge did a similar one with like radial flying buttresses. Um, in there's like an updated version or coming updated version of Bastion of Chaos, and there's like a boss room in it, and yeah, he saw what I was doing, and he sort of went to the next step, and he like did some slope 3D floors, which he sort of cut up and pasted to do these like great sort of big sweeping 3D arches and stuff. And again, you would not have been able to do that before Boris introduced all these new tools. I mean, well, technically you could have, but imagine trying to do curved arches into 3D floors before any of those tools.
No, it would have been awful. I mean, you
Yeah,
had to
yeah,
align it all. All your
yeah,
control sectors had to be perfectly,
yeah,
exactly the same
yeah,
alignment
yeah,
as your actual
exactly.
sectors and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I saw a single flying buttress with 30 floors before that by Dragonfly, and it was very crude compared to the stuff we were doing. It was like maybe 2 or 3 30 floors at most. Um,
Did you hear that, Dragonfly? Crude. What a call out on your
hey,
buttress.
hey, look, Dragonfly's the one who got hired. Okay, he's
That's
he's
true.
he is now a mapping professional.
This is true.
Working on the Proteus team.
It's a fun game.
Um,
I played a
it
bit
is,
of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I quite like it, and yeah, the map editor for it is fantastic. I've only had a very quick play with it, but I've seen the stuff that users are able to do with it quite easily, and yeah, no, it's a fantastic editor. Um,
Yeah, it looks pretty
and
cool. I've seen him working with it.
mm.
So to the final question that I
Yes, this
ask
one,
everybody,
yes,
which
yes, yes.
I mean, I feel like I might know the answer, but I'm hoping to be surprised, as I always am.
Uh,
What is your favorite monster in Doom and why?
I knew this question was coming, so I thought, well, I better think about this because
It has
I,
to be pure gazebo. It has to come from the heart. I don't want it to be calculated.
uh, well, uh, yeah, that's the problem. I have overthought it a little bit,
Okay.
and my initial response would have been the pain elemental, just
Okay. That's a
because
good one.
it's such a nuisance, and there's some I don't know, there's some sadistic delight I get watching someone play a map and they hear that pain elemental alert sound, and there's usually just this sigh of like, no.
Yeah, the
It,
groan.
it, it could just be one pain elemental. I might even have a BFG, but like there's just that laser focus on like I've got to kill it.
Hmm.
But honestly, though, I find I don't have a major favorite these days. Like in general, I just love the overall bestiary so much, and it's just so hard to really pick a favorite and stick to it. And like, I mean, I guess the Vile's probably a close second because it's he's just such a flexible and interesting monster.
Yeah,
Um,
that's been a definitely expectedly the most common
yeah, exactly, and
pick.
that's that exactly. And I mean, and also I love Scotty's answer as well with the imp because
Hmm.
the imp's bloody great. I love the imp. Um, and yeah, I think it's just such a great roster, and it's my dream is to expand on it slightly with a couple of other like great alternative. But what do you cover? Like, where's the gap?
Yeah.
What's the idea? Like the closest I could think of was a big spread attack monster. Like basically a boss Mancubus. That's the only thing I could think of.
Well, I
And
think when I talked to Skillsaw, he wanted like a more glass cannony enemy, which you see in a lot of his stuff,
that's what I'd love as well.
and then
Yeah.
like a slightly uh like a more dangerous flying monster that does more
Yeah.
damage, which is what he
Yeah.
those are the two that he usually fills in his wads
Mm,
and yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was originally the Hive Mother was going to be flying in that for that exact reason, actually.
Hmm.
And then for a number of reasons, she turned into what she has. And that was largely because the initial um, decorate code for her was, yeah, it was built with a lot of other. The guy who, the Mr. Cat who built it
Hmm.
her for me, he assumed that it was. He didn't realize it was for Sunder. I think initially, um, and he understandably sounded disappointed because he had spent time coding this new monster for me, and I felt horrible to say I can't use the code. Although he did actually the code did actually become useful because I gave it to Antares and he converted that to Hacked, like really quickly too. I sort of just mentioned it to him offhand and showed him the code because I was trying to figure out how to do it myself. And he got back to me like, I don't know, half an hour later, if that, with the
Maybe
Hive
he
Mother
used
more.
Deco Hack. Maybe
I have
he does have a
maybe,
lot of experience
or
with that,
maybe,
obviously.
but he also had done like a lot of stuff that I didn't even ask him to do. Like there was the pain charts thing with the hover attack,
Oh yeah.
which I thought was really clever. He also added in the scuttle move as well, which yeah, again I just wasn't expecting. And I think all I did was like tweak the damage slightly because I wanted to make sure that she was not a monster you could stand in front of, like at all, because that was the big thing, as I wanted to deter the player from charging the monster.
Hmm.
Um, like, 'cause, like that's because that's a big thing, particularly when you got the BFG, is like charging most of the
Well, yeah,
bestiary.
it's how you maximize damage for sure.
Exactly, exactly. And I wanted to make a monster that deterred that, like that kept you at like a distance, and she kind of works in that regard. um,
Definitely
it,
scary.
yeah.
Well, on that note, and on the note that it's officially the longest podcast now. It's
Oh,
a very long
wonderful.
one, which I think is fitting because the scale of your maps, I would expect nothing less than a large podcast to go with it. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
it was very interesting hearing about Sunder through the years and your reintroduction back into the community and stuff.
Hmm.
We're all very glad you returned, and thanks a lot for coming on.
No worries.
All right, well, I will finish up here and see you guys next time for another podcast. So, thanks again to the Gazebo and finishing up. See you later.